Welcome back to Potter Red, where the oldest magic is only ever one small spark away from waking. Today's tale, Harry's first accidental magic at age 4 woke the dormant Peverell family Grimoire. If you haven't already, go on and smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1, The Small Hours of the House Number 4, Privet Drive kept its secrets the way ordinary houses do, which is to say badly, in the creak of a stair and the tick of a cooling radiator and the thin bar of hall light that slid under a certain door and lay across a certain floor like a rule drawn to divide the world into out there and in here. In here was a cupboard beneath the stairs. It smelled of dust and floor wax in the cold underside of the house, and it was, at that hour, the only room awake. Harry Potter lay on the cot that filled most of it and watched the light. He had learned the light the way other children learned the faces of their parents. When it was gold and moving, the family was up and the day had teeth. When it was still and pale like now, the house had gone to sleep above him and left him to himself, and those were the good hours, the quiet ones, the ones that belonged to nobody so they could belong a little to him. He was 4 years old. He knew this because Aunt Petunia had said it that morning with the particular flat voice she used for facts about him, the way one might read a label off a tin. 4. He turned the number over. It felt large. It felt like a thing you could climb. His right hand hurt. He held it up into the bar of light to look at it, which was a mistake, because looking made it realer. 2 fingers and the fat part of the palm had gone a shiny, tight pink where the pan had caught him. He had been made to stand on the step stool at the cooker while the sausages spat, because Dudley wanted them and wanted them now, and Aunt Petunia's program was on, and the handle had turned hot without warning, the way handles did, treacherous as everything grown in metal, and he had not cried out because crying out cost more than it bought. He had run the hand under the cold tap when nobody was looking. That was all the medicine there was. Now in the dark the burn ticked and pulsed like a second, smaller heart set into his skin. He did not think, poor me. He had no shape for that thought. What he had instead was a habit older than complaint, which was to find the one bearable thing in a room and hold on to it. Tonight the bearable thing was the spider. She lived in the high corner where the underside of the 7th stair met the wall, and she had been rebuilding the same web for 3 nights, and Harry had watched her do it each night, and he considered her, privately, the most patient person he knew. She did not mind him. She did not want anything from him. When his eyes found her now, a gray stitch of shadow against grayer plaster, some of the tightness in his chest let go. "Hullo," he breathed, so quiet it barely troubled the air. The spider did not answer, being a spider, but she moved one leg, testing a thread, and Harry took it as courtesy. The cold came up through the cot then in the way it did after midnight, seeping from the floorboards into the thin mattress, into the thinner blanket, into him, and he curled smaller around the sore hand and pressed his knees to his chest and shut his eyes and tried to go where the cold could not follow. He was good at going. It was the one journey he could make whenever he liked. Behind his eyes there was a place that was warm and gold and had a person in it who was tall and smelled of something sweet and held him against a beating chest and said a word over and over that he could never quite hear when he woke. He did not know who the person was. He had decided without deciding that she was his, because she was in the only warm place he owned and nobody had ever taken her out of it. The hand throbbed harder. The going would not come. He could not get past the pain to the warm place, and something in him, some 4-year-old muscle of the spirit that had been clenched shut so long it had forgotten it could open, strained toward the warmth and could not reach it and strained again. And then, the way a held breath becomes a cry without any decision in between, something let go. It began under his sore hand. There was no light to it at first, only heat, a soft flood of it welling up out of his own palm and into the burn, not the mean heat of the pan but its opposite, a heat that mended instead of marked, that ran into the tight shiny skin and loosened it, that chased the small second heart of the burn out of him and left the flesh whole and quiet. Harry's eyes came open. He held the hand in front of his face and turned it over, and by the pale bar of hall light he watched the pink go out of it like breath going out of a mirror. The pain simply left. It did not fade. It was there, and then it was a thing that had happened to someone else once, a long time ago. He should have shrunk from it. Grown people he had gathered shrank from exactly this, from the odd things that happened around him, the vanishing and the mending and the impossible, and being made to shrink they turned cruel, and so he had learned to flinch first before them, to feel the strangeness coming and shut it down before it showed. But it was 2 in the morning and the house was asleep, and there was no one whose recoil he had to get ahead of, and so instead of the old cold clench there was only the warmth, and the warmth did not stop at his hand. It ran up his wrist and into his arm and spread through his chest where the cold had been, and it did not feel like it was coming from outside him, and it did not feel like it was going out from him either. It felt like a door opening in a wall he had always taken for a wall, and beyond the door was a room that had been his all along, full and lit and waiting, and the warmth was only the air of that room reaching him at last. He lay very still and let it come. His toes, which had been aching with cold, went loose. The tightness that lived permanently between his shoulders that he had carried so long he had stopped feeling it as anything but the shape of himself, eased and was gone, and the warmth, having filled him, went looking. He felt it go. That was the strange and lovely part, the part he would try for years afterward to put into words and never manage. The warmth reached out past his skin the way roots reach, blind and certain, down through the cot and into the floorboards and along the joists, into the dust and the dark and the forgotten underneath of the house, feeling its way among the discarded things that had been shoved into the far end of the cupboard behind him and left to the years. The broken lamp, the tin of odd screws, the cardboard boxes soft with damp, the stack of old telephone directories, the things a family keeps because throwing away is a decision and keeping is only a failure to decide. Among those things there was a book. Harry did not know it was there. He had never seen it. It had not been there that morning, or it had, but as something else, disguised in the way the truly old know how to disguise themselves, wearing the look of a ruined ledger, water-swollen, spine broken, a thing so plainly worthless that the eye slid off it and found somewhere else to rest. It had lain in the dark of that cupboard for a long time. It had lain in the dark of a great many places for a very long time, keeping itself small, keeping itself still, a coal banked under ash, waiting the way only the patient and the deathless can wait for the one thing that would call it up again. The warmth of the sleeping child touched it, and the book woke. It did not wake the way a sleeper wakes all at once and blinking. It woke the way winter ground wakes from the deep first, some ancient furnace at its heart turning over once and then again, and the cold pages far above not yet knowing anything had changed. Harry, 4 years old, feeling the warmth reach into the dark and touch something and pause there, thought only that the dark had somehow become friendly, that the cupboard had turned kind, and he lay in the good new heat with his mended hand on his chest and did not understand that he had just been answered. But he had been. Out of the dark at the cupboard's end came a sound so faint it was less a sound than the memory of one, a sound like a great volume of pages settling, like a library exhaling in its sleep. And a light. The light was not the hall light. The hall light was electric and mean and the color of weak tea. This new light was gold, deep gold, the gold of the warm place behind his eyes, and it came from low down among the boxes, and it did not flicker. Harry sat up. He did not shrink from it. He would think about that later, at 4 and at 14 and at 40, that in the one moment of his childhood when a flinch would have been reasonable, there had been no room in him for one, because the gold light felt as the remembered chest had felt, the sweet-smelling one, the beating one, and a thing cannot at once feel like home and feel like danger. He crawled off the cot. The floor was warm under his knees now, actually warm, the boards giving back the heat he had poured into them. He went on his hands and knees toward the light, past the tin of screws, past the soft boxes, to the very back of the cupboard where the ceiling came down so low that even a small 4-year-old had to duck, and there, propped against the cold end wall like something set down and left behind, was the book. It was large. In the gold light he could see that it was bound in leather on the brown-black of old riverbeds, and that the leather was worked all over with lines he could not read, patterns that turned and returned into themselves, and that at the center of the front cover, worn nearly smooth by hands he would never know, there was a shape, a triangle, and inside it a circle, and down through both a single straight line. He did not know what it meant. He knew only that his eyes liked it, that it made a satisfying shape, that it was the kind of thing you could draw in a steamed window and feel better for having drawn. The book was warm. He could feel the warmth of it on his face from a foot away, the way you feel a fire. And as he knelt there, looking at it, the book opened. No hand touched it. The cover lifted of its own weight, or against its own weight, slow and deliberate, and turned back, and the pages beneath it fanned and settled, riffling through themselves, searching, and came to rest open at a page in the middle, a page the color of cream and thick as felt, empty. Harry watched the empty page. In the gold light it glowed faintly, patiently, the way a plate glows when it has been near the oven. Then upon it ink began to gather. He saw it come. It did not appear all at once as words. It welled up out of the page from underneath, as the warmth had welled out of his hand, dark points swimming up through the cream and spreading and drawing together into lines, and the lines curved and crossed and became letters, letters in a hand old-fashioned and beautiful and sure, a hand that had all the time in the world and meant to use it. It wrote, "There you are." Harry read it. He was 4, but Aunt Petunia had taught him his letters early, not out of kindness, but because it kept him quiet and out of the way, and he had taken to them the way a thirsty thing takes to water. And now the letters he had learned on cereal boxes and the spines of Dudley's untouched storybooks were being spoken to him by a book that had opened itself in the dark, and he read them, moving his lips, and understood. There you are, as though it had been looking for him. As though he were a thing that could be found. He did not know what to do with being found. No one had ever done it before, or if they had, it was in the warm place behind his eyes and did not count because you could not touch it. He knelt very still and looked at the words until they grew comfortable, and then, because the book had spoken to him and it seemed only right, he spoke back in the whisper he used for the spider, the safe whisper, the one the house could not hear. "Hullo," he said. The ink of the first words sank slowly back into the page as a wave draws back down the sand and new ink rose in its place. Hello, Harry. He knew his own name written down. He had seen it on the paper the school had sent, on the little card in the cupboard door that said the room was his in the way a label says a thing is rubbish, but he had never seen it written kindly. There was a difference, and he could feel the difference the way you feel the difference between a hand raised to strike and a hand held out, though he could not have said where in the letters the kindness lived. It lived there all the same. You know my name, he whispered. I have known it a long time, wrote the book, longer than you have. I knew it before you were given it. I have been waiting to say it to you. Why? The pages seemed to consider. When the ink came again, it came more slowly, choosing. Because you are mine to wait for, it wrote, and I am, if you will have me, yours. Harry did not understand this, not really, not in the way you understand a fact. But there is a younger, deeper understanding that lives in the body before the mind learns its trade, and by that understanding he understood it completely, and something happened in his chest that had never happened there, a loosening, a giving way, like a knot pulled tight the day he was left on this doorstep, found after 4 years by patient fingers and worked loose. He put out his mended hand. He stopped at an inch from the open page because touching things you were not given was one of the great crimes of the house, and he had trained himself not to. You may wrote the book, the ink rising to meet his hesitation, having seen it, you especially. Anything of mine is yours to touch. That is what mine means when it is said honestly. If you learn it, you will. Harry laid his hand upon the page. The paper was warm and soft as a cheek. And at the touch, the gold light gathered and brightened, not harshly, and a feeling went up his arm that was the feeling of the warmth from before turned into a voice with no sound in it, a voice that was simply there in him the way his own thoughts were there, except that it was not his, it was older and calmer and vast, a still deep voice like the voice you would expect a mountain to have if a mountain could bend its whole ancient weight toward you and wish you well. There, said the voice, in him and around him. Now we needn't only write, though I will write too when the words matter. Writing keeps. Speech goes off into the air and is lost, but you're small yet and there is much to say, and some of it is easier said than written. You're talking, Harry whispered. In my head. In the warm room, said the voice, and Harry knew at once, with a jolt, the room it meant, the lit full room behind the door in the wall that he had found tonight, the one that had been his all along. You opened it. I could not have come in otherwise. It had to be you, and it had to be from the inside. That is the first thing you should know about the magic you carry, Harry Potter. No one can open your door but you. Remember it. There will be those who try. The word sat there in the warm dark between them. Magic. Harry knew the word. It was a bad word in this house, the worst word, worse than the words Uncle Vernon said when the car would not start. It was the word Aunt Petunia hissed when the strange things happened, when his hair grew back overnight, when he ended up on the school roof he had no memory of climbing, when the ugly jumper shrank away from going over his head. There'll be none of that funny business. There's no such thing. Do you hear me? There's no such thing. And the more she said there was no such thing, the more he had understood that there was, and that it was his, and that it was dangerous to have. I'm not allowed, he whispered. The funny business, it's not real and I'm not allowed to do it. The voice was quiet a moment. When it came again, there was something in it that Harry had no name for, something that would take him years to recognize as an old hurt carried gently. Who told you that? Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. It makes them cross. Listen to me, said the voice, and it did not rise, it never once rose, but it came in around him and under him and held him up the way water holds up a swimmer, so that he felt for the length of it that he could not sink. What you did tonight was not funny business. It is the oldest true thing in you, older than your name, older than this house, older than the family who left you it. You mended your own hurt because your body remembered how, from a great many bodies before yours, going back and back, all of them yours in the way that matters. It is nothing to hide your face over. It is nothing to shrink from. It is the one thing that is entirely only always yours, that no one in this house or any house can take from you or spoil or forbid. Do you hear me, Harry? Yes, Harry whispered, because it was easier to say yes, but the voice waited, and in the waiting he understood it wanted the true answer, not the safe one, and he had never in his life been asked for the true one, and it undid him a little. His eyes stung. He blinked hard and the sting stayed. It makes them so cross, he said, and his voice wobbled and he hated that it wobbled. When it happens, they lock the door and I don't get, he stopped. Even to the book, even in the warm dark, some things were too large to say. I know, said the voice, and it did not ask him to finish, and the not asking was itself a kindness so unfamiliar that Harry had to look hard at the spider in her corner to keep himself steady. I know what has been done and not done here. I have felt it waking. I will not pretend I have not, and I will not tell you it was small, because you would know I was lying, and I will never lie to you. That is the first of my promises, and there will be others. But I will tell you this, and it is true, and you may hold it against the cold when I am not open. You are not what they have made you feel. You are the last of a very great house, and the house has come for you. Harry looked at the shape on the cover, the triangle and the circle and the line. Is that the house? He asked. That mark, that is the sign of it. You will learn what it means in time when you are grown enough to carry the meaning and not flinch from it. for it is a large meaning and there is no hurry. We have years, you and I mean to spend them well. For tonight know only the name. The gold light pulsed once gently like a slow pulse in a wrist. We are Peverell. The word went through Harry like the warmth had. Peverell. He did not know it. He had never heard it. And yet it fit into him somewhere, into a shape that had been waiting empty for it, the way his name had fit into the book's kindness. Peverell, he said it to himself without saying it aloud. It tasted like the warm place behind his eyes. Peverell, he whispered, trying it. Yes, said the voice, and there was warmth in the word past the warmth of the room, a warmth that was almost, Harry thought, almost like being smiled at, though books cannot smile and he could not see one anyway. Well said. You have a good tongue for it, your father did too. Harry went very still. He had a father. He knew that distantly, the way you know a country exists that you will never visit. He had had a father and a mother, and they had died in a car crash, drunk, useless. That was the story, that was the only story, told once and never again and not to be asked after. He had never had a piece of them he could hold. And now out of the dark, out of a warm book with a triangle on its face, a voice like a loving mountain had said your father did too, and by 3 plain words his father became a real person who had once owned a tongue and said a real word with it, and this book had been there to hear. You knew my father, he said. It was not a question. He did not dare make it a question. Questions could be answered. No, I did, said the voice. And his father and his, back and back to men who lived when this land had no roads and the forests came down to the sea. I have known all of them. I have taught a great many of them. Some I could not save. That is a loss I will tell you of when you are older. But you, and here the voice did something Harry felt rather than heard, a settling, a decision, a great old thing choosing him on purpose in a way no one had ever chosen him. You I mean to do right by, from the beginning, which is tonight. Harry sat back on his heels in the gold light with his hand still on the warm page and felt, rising in him, filling him from the mended hand outward, a thing so new and so large that his small body seemed hardly able to hold it. It was not the light, easy feeling that came to other children over cake and candles. That was a Sunday thing, a Dudley thing, a thing that happened to other people. This was bigger and quieter, and it hurt a little, as a foot hurts when the feeling comes back into it. It was wonder. He had no word for it then and would be given the word much later, but that is what it was, the pure aching thing that fills a child who has been alone and finds, in the last dark hour of an ordinary night, that he is not. Now, said the voice, brisk suddenly, kind and brisk together, the way the best teachers are. You are cold no longer, but you will be when I close and sleep again, for I cannot stay open all the night. It takes more of me than you would guess, and you need your rest, and so, believe it or not, do I. So before we part I will give you one thing to keep. A little thing, the first of your inheritance. Will you have it? Yes, Harry whispered, and this time the yes was the true one, whole and quick, and he felt the book know it. Then look at your hand, said the voice, the one that was hurt, cup it, so. Harry cupped his mended hand before him, palm up in the gold light. Now find the warmth again, said the voice, patient, unhurried, not with your fingers, you cannot pinch it up. Find it the way you found the door tonight, from the inside, by reaching for it because you want it. You are cold and you wish to be warm. That wish is the whole of the spell. Wanting, truly wanting, and knowing without doubt that the wanting will be answered. That is all magic is at the root, before men made it complicated. Wanting rightly, reach Harry, and Harry, kneeling on the warm boards at the back of the cupboard under the stairs, reached. He did not know how. And that was the secret of it, that not knowing, because if he had known how he would have done the how instead of the thing, and the how is a fence around the thing. He simply wanted the warmth in his cupped hand, wanted it as he had wanted the warm place behind his eyes, and he believed, because the voice had told him to, and the voice had not lied and would never lie, that the wanting would be enough. Above his cupped palm, the air kindled. It came the way the light had come, welling up out of nothing, a point of gold that swelled to the size of a marble and hung there, turning very slowly, a bead of soft fire that gave off no smoke and threw no heat that could burn, but only the good heat, the mending heat, the heat of the warm room. Harry stared into it. It lit his face from below, lit the underside of his chin and the tip of his nose and the astonished dark of his eyes, and it turned, and within it there seemed to be smaller turnings, threads of deeper gold folding through the light like the meat folds through a walnut. Oh, Harry breathed just that. Oh, there, said the voice, and now the warmth in it was unmistakable, was frank, was full. On your first night. Well done, child. Do you feel it? That is not in the book. That is not in me. That came out of you, out of your own open door, and it will answer you whenever you call it, in the dark, in the cold, in the locked hours. You need never be without light again. Harry turned his cupped hand, and the little fire turned with it, following his palm, obedient and gentle, a captive son no bigger than a conquer, his entirely his, made by wanting. It's the little sun, he said, because that was what it was. Call it what you like, said the voice, fond. Name the things you make. It is a good habit and an old one. A named thing comes quicker. The little sun turned above Harry's palm and lit the cupboard gold, and lit the spider in her corner so that her web flared for an instant into a wheel of silver threads, and lit the triangle on the book's cover, and lit the astonished, wondering 4-year-old face of the last of the Peverells, who had never in his memory made anything but trouble, and had now, in the small hours of the house, made light. He watched the little sun turn, and a thought arrived that he had never let himself finish before. The other times, he said, he kept his voice under the stairs, under the house, in the safe place where only the book and the spider could hear. When my hair grew back, and the roof, and the jumper. He counted them on the fingers of his mended hand as he counted the spider's legs. Aunt Petunia said I did them on purpose, to be wicked. I got put in here for the roof for 2 days. He looked at the light and not at the book, because looking at the book while he said it would have been too much. I didn't know how I did them, I still don't, but she said. The gold along the pages stirred, and the voice came, and it had gone very quiet and very level, the way a deep water goes flat over the deepest place. Hear me carefully, for this matters more than the light in your hand. The words came slow, weighted, each set down like a stone in a wall meant to stand 1,000 years. You did not do those things to be wicked, you could not have. You did not do them on purpose at all, any more than you meant your heart to beat while you slept. Your hair grew back because it is your hair, and it knew its length and would not be robbed of it. The jumper would not swallow you because some part of you, cornered, said no, and the magic heard the no and obeyed it, for that is what it is for. And the roof, the voice paused. You were running from a thing that meant to hurt you, and your magic took you up out of its reach and set you somewhere it could not follow. That is not wickedness, Harry. That is a house guarding its own. That is the oldest kindness there is, and it was done for you when no one else would do it, by the only guardian you had, which was the magic in your blood. Harry sat with that. He turned it over as he had turned the number 4. It was almost too large to hold. He had carried the roof for a year as a shameful thing, a proof that he was bad in the way they said he was bad, and now the loving mountain was telling him it had been the opposite, that the strangeness had been on his side the whole time, had been reaching for him out of the dark long before tonight, unable to speak, only able to act, saving him clumsily because there was no one to save him well. Something went out of his shoulders that had been in them so long he had taken it for bone. He did not cry. He had trained the crying out early. It did not come when called and did not come now. But he pressed his freed hand flat against his own chest over the place where the warmth had first spread, and he held it there, and he breathed, and the little sun turned, and for a while no one said anything because nothing needed saying. You were never wicked, the voice said at last, softer than the dark. You were only alone. That part is finished. Sleep now. Far away, across sleeping counties, beneath a city that never entirely slept, in a hall of white marble where the day's ledgers had long been shelved and locked, an old book stirred that no living hand had touched in a generation. It was not a beautiful book. The beautiful ones were kept elsewhere under glass for show. This one was a working book, an accounting of a working sort, bound plainly in dragon-hide gone the gray of a winter sea, and it sat in its narrow slot in the deepest of the record rooms among 10,000 of its fellows, and upon its spine, tooled small, was a single word in the old goblin script, and beneath it, in the letters of men, a name. The name was Peverell. The book had been a dead account for longer than any goblin now drawing breath had served the bank. Dead accounts did not close, goblins did not close what might yet quicken, but they slept, and their ink sat cold and settled in their columns, and no one looked at them but the archivists making their slow rounds with their lamps, checking that the sleepers still slept. Tonight the sleeper woke. Along the last used line of the last used page, ink that had lain dry and quiet for years came up out of the vellum the way it had come up out of Harry's cream-colored page, dark points swimming and spreading and drawing together, and wrote in the terse hand the ledgers kept for themselves a single entry and dated it and underlined it once. Line active, air stirs, magic of the house drawn upon. The lamp of the archivist on his round that hour was 3 rooms distant. He did not see it happen. But he felt it the way goblins feel a change in the weight of gold, a small wrongness in the air of the record room, a stir where there should have been only stillness, and he lifted his lamp and turned his gray face toward the deep shelves and stood a moment, listening with his whole body, the way his kind had listened in the roots of mountains since before men built cities. Then he went, unhurried, for goblins are never hurried and are never slow, to see which of the dead had waked. He found the slot by counting, not by reading, his knotted fingers walking the spines in the dark until they came to the one that was warm. He drew it out. He read the fresh line by the light of his lamp and read it again, and stood a long moment with the old ledger open in his hands and his gray face giving nothing away, for goblins do not spend their faces cheaply. A dead account did not wake for a whim. Dead account of this account did not wake at all, had not waked in living memory, had been marked in the great index with the small hard sigil that meant watch and wake me when it moves. It had moved. Somewhere above the city, above the counties, a child of the oldest coin the bank had ever kept had reached into the deep water of his blood and drawn something up. The archivist closed the ledger and took it under his arm and went to wake his master, because some names are not left for the morning. And in the cupboard under the stairs at number 4 Privet Drive, the gold light dimmed softly, softly, as the book grew tired. I must sleep now, said the voice, and it was fainter, and Harry felt the fainting, and a cold clutch took him, sudden and total, that when it slept it would be gone, that this would prove to be one of the warm places you could not touch, that he would wake on the cold cot with a locked door and no book and no voice, and no, he had dreamed it. The book felt the clutch of it. Of course it did. It had been reading the hearts of Peverell since the forests came down to the sea. I will be here, it said, and though the voice was going, the words were iron under the softness, were a vow, were the second of its promises. I do not leave. I have never once left the one who woke me, not in all the long line of you, not through fire, not through war, not through death itself, and I will not begin with you, who are the smallest and have been the most alone and are, I think, going to be the dearest. When you wake, put your hand here. The gold light gathered for a moment over the triangle on the cover, marking it, and I will open. In the day, be careful, there are eyes in this house that must not see us yet, and I will teach you how to keep us hidden, but that is a lesson for tomorrow's dark. Tonight only sleep, take the little son into your bed. It will keep as long as you hold the wanting, and when you sleep the wanting will hold itself, for a while, out of habit. You have made a good habit tonight, Harry Potter, hold to it. Don't go, Harry whispered. He knew it was no use, everything went, but he said it anyway, the way you say things to the dark. I am not going, said the voice, almost gone now, almost only warmth. I am only closing my eyes. There is a difference, and you of all children know it, for you have learned to close yours and still be here. Learn this too, so can I. Good night, child, small heir, last of my house, good night. The cover of the book lowered itself slowly against its own great weight, and settled, and the triangle and circle and line lay quiet in the dimming gold, and the gold went down and down until it was only a cold glow along the edges of the pages, and then only the memory of gold, and then the cupboard was dark again but for the little sun turning gently above Harry's cupped and mended hand. He should have shrunk from the dark. He always had, a little, in the private way he shrank from most things. But not now. He had a light he had made himself, and a book that did not leave, and a name that fit the empty shape in him, and a father who had once said a word with his tongue, and it was, taken all together, more than he had ever had, more than he had known there was to have. He crawled back to the cot, careful of the little son, cupping it against his chest, and he lay down, and he drew the thin blanket up, and he found that he did not need it, that the warmth he had poured into the board still rose around him, and the little sun still glowed against his heart, and that the cold, for the first night in his remembering, could not get in. He looked at the light. It turned. Within it the deeper gold folded and unfolded, slow as breathing. Little son, he said to it, so quiet the spider could barely have heard. You stay, all right, you stay. And whether because he wanted it truly, or because a made thing comes quicker to its name, or because in the deep of the house a very old and very patient magic had taken a very small and very lonely child under its wing, and did not mean to let the dark have him, the little son stayed. It turned above the sleeping face of Harry Potter through the last dark hours of the night, and it lit the underside of the seventh stair, and it lit the spider mending her endless patient web, and it did not go out. Above, the house slept on and knew nothing. Below in the warm dark the last of the Peverells slept too, and dreamed, for the first night in his memory, not of the warm place he could not reach, but of a golden room with an open door and a voice like a loving mountain saying his name like a thing worth saying. And the book, closed, warm, patient, kept watch over him the way it had kept watch over all his line, and let him dream. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Lessons told in ink. The first thing the book taught him was how to hide. This surprised Harry, who had expected, in the way of 4-year-olds, that magic would be all fire and flying. But the book was patient about it, and the book was right, and by the third night he understood why. A thing that cannot be hidden cannot be kept, and a thing that cannot be kept is not truly yours, and everything the book had to give him depended on it being his and staying his in a house that took his things. Put your hand here, it had told him that first night, and marked the triangle for him with a gathering of gold, and so each night now, when the house had gone still and the bar of hall light lay pale across the floor, Harry crept to the far end of the cupboard where the ledger that was not a ledger sat among the damp boxes, and laid his palm flat on the worn sign and waited. The cover would warm under his hand. Then it would lift, slow and deliberate, against its own great weight, and the gold would come up out of the deep of the pages, and the voice would settle into the warm room behind his eyes, and Harry would not be alone. Teach me to make it not seen, he said on the third night, for he had lain awake through the whole of the second day with his eyes fixed on the far end of the cupboard. Certain Aunt Petunia would clean it and find the book. If she finds you, she'll take you. She takes things. She will not find me, said the voice, and there was something under the calm of it, something amused and something iron, both at once. I have hidden from cleverer eyes than your aunts in cleaner houses than this, but you are right to think of it, and righter to think of it first, before the fire and the flying. So, attend. And the book taught him the oldest of its quiet arts, which was not to vanish, for vanishing draws the eye that notices a gap, but to become uninteresting. To wear the look of a thing already seen and dismissed. To be so plainly worthless that the gaze slid off it and went hunting for something better, as Aunt Petunia's gaze slid off the cracked flower pot and the balding doormat and the nephew under the stairs. You know this magic already, the voice told him, and the words came gentle, choosing their way over rough ground. You have worked it on yourself, without a book, without a teacher, for as long as you have lived here. You make yourself small at the table so no eye lands on you. You go quiet in the hall so no foot turns your way. You have been casting a spell of not being seen since before you could speak, and casting it well enough to survive. All I do now is give the spell a name and show you it can be lent to other things than the small self of a child who has had to learn it young. Give me your hand. Harry put his hand on the page. Now think of the cracked flower pot on the sill, said the voice. The one no one waters. When did you last truly look at it? Harry thought. He could not remember. He knew it was there. He never saw it. That, said the voice, satisfied. That not seeing. Take it in your hand like a coin. Feel the weight of it. Now lay it over me, the way you would lay a blanket over a sleeping thing you did not want woken. It was hard. It was the hardest thing he had tried, harder than the little sun, because the little sun was a wanting and this was a not wanting, a turning away done on purpose, and a 4-year-old's mind is a bright and darting thing that does not like to turn away. But Harry wanted the book safe more than he wanted anything, and wanting was the whole of the spell. The voice had said so, and he bent the whole of his small fierce want toward making the book into a thing not worth a glance. He felt it take. It was like the click of a latch he could not see. The book under his hand seemed to settle, to dim, to grow ordinary, and when he sat back and made himself look at it plainly, made himself see it as Aunt Petunia would see it, his eyes slid off the worn cover and down to the floor and away, and he had to drag it back by main force, and even then the book looked like nothing, like rubbish, like a water-ruined old account not worth the carrying to the bin. Oh, he said, and lost the spell, laughing, both hands pressed to his mouth to keep the sound in, and the book came back into focus, gold and real and warm. You laughed and let it go, said the voice, and it was not a scolding. There was a warmth running under it that Harry was learning to hear. That is the way of it at your age, and there is no harm in it here, where only I can see. But learn to hold it while you feel other things. Laughter should not cost you your guard. That is a lesson for a longer life than yours has been so far, and we will come back to it many times before you have it whole. For tonight, again, lay the not seeing over me, and this time keep it while you tell me one true thing about your day. So Harry laid the not seeing over the book and held it, and while he held it he told the warm dark that Dudley had got a red bicycle and had ridden it into the fence twice and cried, and that he, Harry, had been made to pick the mangled marigolds out of the flower bed after and had not minded, because the earth was cool and the worms were company. And the not seeing held, and the book, disguised as rubbish beneath his talking hand, listened to every word. That was how the nights went through the autumn and into the cold. By day Harry was what he had always been, the thing under the stairs, the extra chore, the shape at the edge of the table that got the smallest portion in no seconds. He learned to keep two faces, the outside one dull and downcast and careful, drawing no eye, and the inside one lit like the little sun, because at the bottom of every gray day was the certainty of the dark to come, and the warm room and the voice and the lessons. The concealment was tested in the spring, and it held, and the holding taught Harry more about himself than any lesson had. Aunt Petunia decided one Saturday, in the sudden way she decided such things, that the cupboard under the stairs was a disgrace and would be turned out. Harry was pulling weeds when he heard the announcement carry through the open kitchen window, and he went cold to the roots of his hair, and then he made himself go on pulling weeds, one and then the next, because a boy who stopped weeding to run indoors was a boy who had something to hide, and the whole art of the hiding was to be a boy who had nothing. He waited until she called him. He came slow, wiping his hands, dull-faced. She had already hauled the boxes out into the hall, the tin of screws, the soft cardboard, the telephone directories, and there among them, dragged half into the light, sat the book. It looked like nothing. He had laid the not seeing over it every single night without fail, folded it down over the cover like a blanket over a sleeping thing, and the spell had set into the leather the way a stain sets into wood, so that now in daylight, with his aunt standing over it with a bin bag in her fist, the book was simply the most boring object in the hall. Petunia's eyes went to it and slid off it and went to the directories instead. Rubbish, she said of the directories, and dropped them in the bag. Her hand came down toward the book, closed on the box beside it, and moved that instead. Harry stood very still and did the only thing he could do, which was to want, quietly with everything he had, that his aunt should not look at the ruined old ledger a second time. He did not push at her. Pushing would be felt. He only leaned the whole weight of his wanting against the not seeing, the way you lean a shoulder against a door to hold it shut, and he held it, and he kept his face dull, and he kept his hands loose, and he breathed. Petunia's hand came down toward the book a second time. That old thing, she muttered, and her fingers touched the cover, and Harry did not move a muscle of his face, though everything under it had gone to water. Filthy. Water got into it. Her lip curled. She wiped her fingers on her apron, plainly regretting the touch, and Harry understood in that turn of her mouth that the spell had done more than hide the book. It had made the book distasteful, a thing you did not want in your hand, a thing you wiped off. Vernon can take it to the tip with the rest, or no, leave it, I'm not touching that again. And she straightened and moved on to the balding doormat, and the danger passed by the width of a curled lip. She had him scrub the cupboard out on his hands and knees and put everything back, and he put the book back last of all in the far dark corner with his own hands, and laid his palm on the triangle for the space of one held breath, which was as long as he dared, and felt the leather warm under his skin in answer. Then he shut the door on it and went to his supper with his dull face on, and no one at the table knew that the child passing the potatoes had, that afternoon, hidden the oldest book in England in plain sight from the woman who had raised him, and won. The lessons were never showy. The book would not teach him showy things, though he asked. "Can you teach me to fly?" he said once, thinking of the roof. "No," said the voice. "Can you teach me to make Dudley's bicycle break?" "No," said the voice, and now there was something in it stern enough to still him. "Listen, and I will tell you a thing about the magic you carry, and you will carry the thing as long as you carry the magic, which is to say, always. Old magic does not perform. It is not a trick to be pulled from a hat for the pleasure of the pulling, and it is not a stone to be thrown at a boy you dislike, no matter how richly he has earned a stone. Magic that is old is magic that remembers. It does not perform, it keeps." The gold pulsed slow, deliberate. It keeps warmth against the cold. It keeps a hurt from festering. It keeps a hidden thing hidden and a promised thing promised. It keeps you. When you are grown, you will have power enough to break a great deal, and you will find the world full of teachers eager to show you the breaking. I mean to give you the keeping first, so that when the breaking comes to your hand you will know what it is for, which is only ever the guarding of a thing worth keeping. Do you understand me? Harry did not entirely, but he understood that it mattered and that the voice had never once lied to him, and so he said, yes, the true yes, and the book knew the difference and was content. And so instead of flying, the book taught him mending. It began with the cup. There was a cup in the cupboard, a chipped enamel mug that had been Harry's since he could remember, white gone gray, with a hairline crack running down from the rim that let the water weep out slow so that he could never fill it more than halfway. He had never thought to mind. It was his cup, things of his were broken. The broken and the his were the same category in his mind, and he had not questioned it. The book questioned it. "Bring me your cup," it said one night, and when Harry set the battered gray mug beside the open page in the gold light, the voice went quiet a moment, reading it, reading the crack and the grayness and the years in which a child had thought a leaking cup was all a child like him could expect. When it spoke again, it was very gentle. "We will mend this," it said, "not because a cup matters. Because you should learn early and in your bones that a broken thing of yours can be made whole, and that you are the one who can make it so. Put your hands around it, both hands, feel the crack, not with your fingers, with the wanting. Find where the two edges pull apart and want them together, not force. Want. The cup wants to be whole. A made thing always remembers what it was and yearns back toward it. You have only to agree with the yearning and lend it your strength. Now." Harry cupped the mug in both hands and shut his eyes and felt for the crack as he had felt for the door in the wall. And there it was, a line of wrongness in the round rightness of the cup, two lips of enamel pulled apart, and he wanted them together, wanted it with the same want he had turned on the warm place, and he agreed with the cup's own yearning and lent it his strength. The warmth ran down his arms into his hands and into the cup. When he opened his eyes, the crack was gone, not filled, not patched. Gone, healed, the enamel whole and smooth, and where the crack had been, faintly, if you turned it to the gold light, a line of deeper white, a scar that was not a weakness but a memory, the cup's record of having been broken and made whole, worn now like a thing survived rather than a thing suffered. Harry filled the cup at the tap that night, all the way to the brim, and drank it standing in the dark, and did not spill a drop. There, said the voice, and the warmth in it had gone frank and full and close, and Harry drank that warmth down with the water, and was fuller than the water could account for. Now you know, whatever they break you can mend, whatever they crack you can heal. Not always the thing itself, some things break past mending, and I will not tell you otherwise, for I do not lie to you, but you will always have the knowing of it, that the whole is truer than the break, and that you are made to mend. Keep the cup. Look at the scar when the days are hard. It is a good scar. It is the first thing in this house that was broken and got better. Harry kept the cup. He looked at the scar often. He mended other things after that in the safe dark. A sock worn through at the heel made sound. A page torn from one of Dudley's cast-off storybooks, the tear closing under his thumb until the picture ran whole again. A night on a green hill under a sun that Harry thought looked a little like his little son and prized the better for it. A button, a shoelace, the spine of the book itself once, though the book laughed at him for offering, a great slow, warm rumble in the deep water of the voice. "I am not broken, child," it said, fond. "I only wear the look of broken, which is a different thing and a useful one, and you would do well to learn the difference in people too, in time. But I thank you for the offering. No one has offered to mend me in 300 years. Harry mended the doormat's balding corner. He mended the cracked flower pot on the sill, the one no one watered, and then, because it seemed wrong to mend a pot and leave it empty, he took to tipping the last of his half-cup of water into it each night. And by spring there was a green thing growing in it that no one had planted and no one noticed, and it was, though Harry did not have the word, the first living thing he had ever kept alive, and it made him feel a way he had no name for and did not need one. The blossoming was slow, and it was quiet, and it showed in nothing that a grown eye would catch. He slept warm now every night, and a child who sleeps warm is a different child by day than one who does not, steadier, quicker, less quick to flinch. He ate what he was given and did not go hungry after, because the book had taught him a small mean-tempered charm for keeping bread from going stale and one for warming a cold potato in his cupped hands. And while he could not make food out of nothing, for that was a deep art and a dangerous one, and he was very young, he could stretch what little came to him until it was enough, and enough to a child who has known not enough is a feast. His hair, which had been thin and dull, grew thick and stubborn. His eyes, which had been the flat, wary eyes of a small thing waiting to be struck, began in the safe dark to hold a light that was not the little sun's. And though he kept them downcast by day and let no one see it, it was there, banked and waiting, and Mrs. Fig from number 6, who kept cats and kept, though Harry did not know it, a watch, remarked to no one in particular over her tea that the Potter child was looking less peaky lately, and then, catching herself, said nothing more. And wrote a short, careful letter that evening to an address in Scotland and posted it herself. But that is a thread for later. In the cupboard, through that slow-turning year, there was only the child and the book and the growing. Trouble came, as trouble does, from Dudley first. It came in the back garden on a grey Saturday, where Harry had been set to weeding, while Dudley and 2 boys from Dudley's school played a game that consisted mostly of shoving. Harry had learned the geometry of Dudley's games and kept to the far bed out of the orbit of the shoving, but the game came looking for him, as Dudley's games always did once they grew bored of one another, and Dudley planted himself over Harry where he knelt in the dirt and said the things Dudley said, and then, for the pleasure of his audience, shoved him hard between the shoulders to put him face down in the flower bed. The shove landed. Harry felt it land. And then he felt the strangest thing, the thing that would keep him awake half the night trying to understand it. The shove landed, and its force went out of it. Dudley's hands hit his back with all Dudley's considerable weight behind them, and Harry, who should have gone sprawling, who had gone sprawling from lighter shoves 100 times, rocked forward onto his hands and no further. The ground seemed to soften to catch him. The push spent itself against a cushion of thick air a hand's width from his skin, and went nowhere. He looked down at the dirt under his palms. It was ordinary dirt. Dudley, thrown off by a shove that had not done what shoves did, staggered a half-step and had to catch himself, and the 2 boys laughed, but they laughed at Dudley's stagger and not at Harry's fall, because there had been no fall, and Dudley went red and confused and lost interest and took his game elsewhere, and Harry knelt in the flower bed and understood slowly that the book had reached out of the cupboard, across the whole width of the house, and softened a blow it could not have seen coming. That night he asked. Not I, said the voice, and there was something careful in it, something being decided. I cannot reach so far, not yet, not while I sleep the most of the day and give the most of my waking to you and to keeping myself hidden. That was not me, Harry. Then what? You said the book, you did it. You have carried a guard about yourself since you were small enough to need one, cast without a book and without a word, the way you cast the not being seen. When the blow came, the guard answered, because that is what it is there for, and it's getting stronger as you get stronger, feeding on the warmth you no longer have to spend on merely surviving. I did not soften the blow. I woke the part of you that could, and now it is awake, and it will not sleep again. You are guarding yourself, child. You have begun to guard yourself. Harry sat with that in the gold light, and it was almost too large, like the roof had been, like the floor had been. Hear me, though, the voice went on, and it went stern, the good sternness, the kind that fenced a cliff. You will want, now that you feel it, to strike back. It is natural, it is even just. A creature struck learns to strike, but you will not, and I will tell you why, and you will keep the why the way you keep the cup. If you strike back, they will see. They cannot see, not yet, not while you are small and in their keeping, and there is no one to stand between you and them. The day you show them what you are is the day this house becomes a cage with the lock on the outside, and I will not have it, and neither, when you are older and understand, will you. So you will guard, and you will not strike, and you will keep, and you will wait. Guarding is not weakness. It is the harder magic and the higher. Anyone can throw a stone. It takes a great soul to hold a shield and not throw it. That's not fair, said Harry, and his voice cracked on it, because he was 4, nearly 5, and it was not fair, and he knew it, and the knowing sat in his chest like a swallowed stone. No, the voice agreed and did not soften it, and the not softening was its own kind of respect. It is not fair. I will never tell you it is fair, but it is true, and true is what will keep you alive to see the day the fairness comes. And it will come, Harry. I have watched a great many unfair things run their course. They run out. This one will run out, and you will outlast it, because you are guarded now, and you are growing, and you are not alone. Hold to that. It is truer than the unfairness. Harry held to it. It was hard. He held to it anyway. He turned 5 at the end of July. He knew the day because he had learned to read the calendar in the kitchen, and he had watched the 31st of July come around as he watched the light under the door quietly for himself, expecting nothing, because nothing was what the day had always been. There was no cake. There had never been a cake. Cake was a Dudley thing, and Dudley's own birthday 2 months before had filled the house with a mountain of them, and a heap of presents that had made Dudley cry because there were only 36, and last year there had been 37. Harry had watched that from the corner and eaten his supper and gone under the stairs and thought about the little son. On the night of his own birthday, the 31st of July, Harry laid his hand on the worn triangle and the book opened, and before he could say a word, before he could tell it about his day, the gold came up brighter than usual, warm as a hearth, and the voice said, "Happy birthday, Harry Potter." Harry went still. No one had said it. He had not expected anyone to say it. He had not, he realized, sitting there in the gold, ever once in his life been told happy birthday by a living voice, and now the loving mountain had said it, had known the day and kept it and said it, and something happened in Harry's chest that was too big for the cupboard. 5 years old today, the voice went on, gentle, unhurried, filling the silence Harry could not fill. A good age, an age of asking why. Your father asked why without stopping from the day he could speak. It drove his teachers to distraction and won my whole regard. You have his way of it, I think. Now, I have no cake to give you, and I would give you a cake the size of the house if giving were mine to do, but it is not yet, not while I am a book in a cupboard and you are small. So I will give you what I can give, which is a thing worth more than cake, though you may not know it yet. I will give you a memory that is not yours so that it can become yours. Sit still, put your hand flat, and I will show you the day you were born as I felt it from the deep water where I slept, and the book showed him. It was not a picture. It was warmer than a picture and dimmer, a thing felt more than seen, the way the warm place behind his eyes had always been felt. Harry felt a summer night, a real one, 5 years ago made present. He felt a house that was not this house, a house that was loud and warm and smelled of something baking and something green growing at the window. He felt two people in it whose faces he could not quite see, because the book had slept and not watched with eyes, but he could feel them, could feel the shape of them. A man laughing in a way that cracked on the edges from too much feeling. A woman's voice going soft and fierce over something small and new. And he could feel, faint and far and utterly certain, the moment a magic older than the house turned over in its deep sleep and knew, without waking, that the line had gone on, that there was a new small air in the world. And something in it eased that had been clenched a long age. I felt you come into the world, the voice said, soft as the dark. Even asleep, I felt it. The line does not end while there is one to carry it, and there was one, and it was you. And something in me that had waited a long age turned toward you and settled, and I have been waiting to tell you so. That is my gift. You were wanted, Harry. Whatever came after, whatever they have told you, on the night you were born a whole house wanted you, and so in my slow, deep way did I happy birthday, small air. Keep this one, it is true. Harry kept it. He held it against every cold thing that had ever been said to him, and it held. It was the best birthday of his life, and no one but a book and a spider knew he had had it at all, and that was enough. That was more than enough. For the first time he let himself feel the thing that had been growing all that year under the warmth and the mending and the guarding, and the thing had a name, and the name was hope, and he let it in. The trouble with Vernon came in the autumn, and it came, as the worst trouble does, out of a small thing. A plate broke. It was not Harry's fault, it was Dudley's, who had swept it off the counter reaching for the biscuit tin. But Dudley had wailed at the noise, and Aunt Petunia had come running, and Uncle Vernon had come after her from the lounge where the football was, and there was Harry standing nearest the ruin of the plate, and there was Dudley pointing, and the story wrote itself the way the stories always wrote themselves in that house, with Harry at the wrong end of them. I didn't, Harry said. He knew it was no use. He said it anyway. It was, don't you lie, said Uncle Vernon, and his face had gone the color it went, the deep beetroot that came before the worst of it, and he came across the kitchen with his hand already rising, and Harry, 5 years old, did the thing he had done all his life, which was to make himself small and turn his shoulder and wait for it to land. But under the making small, without his willing it, the guard woke. He felt it wake. It came up out of him the way the warmth came, but colder, harder, a thing with edges, and it spread out from his skin into the air around him and met the descending hand and would not let it through. Vernon's hand stopped. It stopped a hand's width from Harry's turned shoulder, stopped as though it had struck a wall, and Harry felt the shape of the wall, felt it standing between him and the blow, a curve of hardened air that hummed against his skin, cold and certain in his. Vernon pushed against it. Harry felt him push, felt the man's whole weight go into driving the hand down through the empty air that would not empty, and the hand did not move, could not move, hung there trembling a hand's width from the child it could not reach. The kitchen went very quiet. The football chattered on in the other room. Vernon's face changed. The beetroot drained out of it and left behind something Harry had never seen there before, something that took Harry a moment to place because it was so strange on that face. The man's eyes had gone wide and wet at the rims. His mouth hung open with no words in it. His weight had begun to tip back and away from the child he could not reach, his heels finding the floor and pressing, as a man presses who wants very much to be somewhere else. What? Vernon said, and his voice had gone thin. What are you? I'm not doing anything, Harry said, and it was true. He was not that he could feel, the guard was doing it, the guard he had not called and could not now dismiss, and he stood inside the curve of cold air with his shoulder turned and his eyes down and did not move, because moving might break it, and he did not know what would happen then. Aunt Petunia had gone white to the lips. She was staring at her husband's stopped hand and at the space between it and Harry, the empty space that was not empty, and her mouth was working, and Harry knew that she had seen this before somewhere long ago, that the word she would not say was rising in her and she was fighting it down. Vernon, she said, strangled. Vernon, leave it, leave him, just leave it. Vernon pulled his hand back. It came away from the wall of air slow and shaking, and he cradled it against his chest like a hand snatched from a flame, though the guard had not burned him, had only refused him, and refusal to a man like Vernon was its own kind of wound. He backed away. He backed all the way to the kitchen door, and he looked at Harry standing small and downcast by the broken plate, and whatever he saw there sent him back a further step, and he turned and went, and the football swallowed him. Aunt Petunia stood a moment longer. She looked at Harry, and Harry looked at the floor, and the guard sang cold and quiet in the air between them, and neither of them said the word. "Clean up the plate," Aunt Petunia said at last, and her voice had gone flat and strange, the label voice, but under it there was a crack, and through the crack came something that was almost, that Harry would think about for a long time after, that was almost pleading. "And then get in your cupboard," and she stopped. She pressed her lips white, and "Stay there, just stay there." Harry cleaned up the plate. The guard went down slow as he calmed, the cold air softening back to ordinary air, and by the time he had the last shard in the bin it was gone, and he was only a small boy again, sweeping up a mess that was not his. He went into his cupboard and shut the door. He laid his hand on the triangle. Book opened before his palm had settled, opened faster than it had ever opened, and the gold came up hot and close and quick, the loving mountain roused in a way Harry had not once felt it roused. "Are you hurt?" the voice said, and it was not a question shaped like the others. It came quick and low. "Show me, did he reach you?" "No," Harry whispered. He was shaking now that it was over, shaking in the aftermath the way a body shakes when the danger has passed and everything it held back comes due at once. No, it stopped him, the cold wall, it stopped his hand. He put both his shaking hands flat on the warm page and held on. "I didn't call it, it just came. Was that wrong? Did I do a wrong thing?" He saw. Aunt Petunia saw. "You said they mustn't." "Hush," said the voice, and the gold came up around him and under him and held him the way it had the first night, held him up so he could not sink. "Hush, child, you did nothing wrong. You did nothing at all. The guard did what a guard is for, and I will not have you shrink from the one thing in this house that has never once failed you. Listen to me. Breathe." There, again, Harry breathed. The shaking eased. "What woke tonight," the voice said when Harry was steady enough to hear it, and now the words came slow and weighted, each one set down with care, "is older than the little son and older than the mending and older, I think, than you are ready to fully hold, so I will give you only as much as you can carry tonight. There is a magic in thresholds, Harry, in doorways, in the line between a house and the world, between welcome and unwelcome, between a place that is yours and a place that is theirs. It is among the oldest magics there are, older than wands, older than words, old as the first family that ever drew a circle in the dirt and said, 'Inside this we are safe.' Your kind, my house, the line you carry, we were keepers of that magic when the world was young. And tonight, when a man of this house raised his hand against the air of that line inside the walls that are meant to shelter him, the threshold itself said no. Not I, not you, not only you. The house said no. The oldest law said no. A guest under a roof is not to be harmed, a child under a roof is sacred, and the man who forgot it found the very air had not forgotten. Harry looked at the gold. "But it's their house," he said. "Not mine, I just live under the stairs." The book was quiet a moment. When it spoke, there was a fierceness in it banked down under the calm, an old and patient fury on his behalf that Harry could feel like heat off a stove. "You have lived here 5 years, it said. You have swept these floors and weeded this garden and warmed these rooms with more magic than they will ever know they were given. You have kept this house without once being thanked for the keeping. By every old law that matters, by every law older than the deed with their name on it, this is your house as much as theirs, more than theirs, for you have poured yourself into it and they have only lived in it. The threshold knows what the deed does not. It knows who keeps a place, and it guards the keeper. Tonight it guarded you." The gold pulsed slow and sure. "He will not raise his hand to you again, not because he has grown kind, he has not, do not look for that and be let down. He will not, because a man who has felt the very air refuse him does not lift his hand a second time to learn the lesson twice. Let that keep you in whatever form it comes. You are safer tonight than you were this morning, and that is not nothing, that is a great deal." Harry lay down on his cot with his hand still on the open page, and above him the house was silent, and no one came, and no one would come, and for the length of that silence he let himself feel how much lighter the not coming made him. "Sleep," the voice said, softening toward the closing. "You did well tonight, though you did nothing, which is its own hard art, and one you will need again. You held the shield, and you did not throw it. Your father would have stood a little taller for it tonight. So do I sleep, Harry. The threshold keeps its watch, and so do I." The gold went down, slow, slow, and the little sun came up in Harry's cupped hand without his calling it. A habit now, warm and turning, and it lit the underside of the seventh stair and the spider in her corner and the mended cup on the shelf with its scar of deeper white, and it lit the face of a child who had that day been threatened and been guarded and been kept. Above, the house lay wary in the dark and did not sleep well and did not understand why. Below in the warm, the last of the Peverells slept sound, and the book kept watch, and outside in the street, in the small hours, a marmalade cat sat under the lamp at number 6 and looked up at the dark window over the door of number 4 for a long time before it turned and went home. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The name in the ledger deep beneath the city, in a chamber of black stone lit by lamps that burned without smoke, the elder of the record keepers received a book he had not expected to see in his lifetime. His name was Ragnarok, and he was old even by the reckoning of his kind, which measures its ages in the working of veins and the settling of mountains rather than in the brief candles of men. He sat behind a desk cut from a single slab of the deep rock, and upon the desk, between his knotted gray hands, lay the ledger the archivist had brought up from the sleeping shelves, and Ragnar did not touch it at once. He looked at it. He read the name tooled small upon the spine, and he read it again, and the lamps burned, and the archivist stood and waited, for one did not hurry the elder, and one did not speak before he spoke. Peverell, Ragnar said at last. The word came out of him slow, weighed, set down like a coin of great denomination on a scale. You are certain. The line woke, master, said the archivist, whose name was Nagnok, and who had walked the sleeping shelves for 200 years and had never once in all that time felt what he had felt 3 nights past. The account stirred. The ink came up of its own accord and wrote the entry I have shown you. I did not summon it. No living hand has drawn upon that account since the last of the elder branch went into the dark, and that was before my grandsire's grandsire kept the count. It should not have moved. It moved. Ragnar opened the ledger. He turned the great stiff pages, and the pages whispered against one another, dry as autumn, and he came to the last written line, and below it, fresh, dark, unmistakable, the new entry and its date and its single underline. Line active. Air stirs. Magic of the house drawn upon. He looked at it a long while. Goblins keep the gold of wizards because wizards, for all their power, are careless creatures, quick to make and quick to spend and quicker to forget, and someone must remember. That is the bargain, older than the treaties, older than the wars the treaties ended. The goblins remember. They remember every coin and every debt and every oath sworn over a vault, and they remember the great houses, the ones whose gold has run through the bank since the bank was cut from the living rock. And of all the great houses there was none older, none deeper, none more carefully watched over the long silence of its sleeping, than the house whose name was tooled on the spine of the book between Ragnar's hands. The elder branch was thought spent, Nagnok said, when the silence had gone on long enough that speech would not offend. The name passed sideways into the potters, generations gone and thinned as names thin. We kept the account open only from custom, from respect. No one believed it would wake. Custom, said Ragnok, is the memory of reasons we have forgotten. We kept it open because those who cut these shelves knew a thing we have let ourselves forget, that the deepest coin is not gold. He closed the ledger. His hands rested flat upon the cover, over the worn mark that even here, tooled small in dragonhide, was the same mark the child under the stairs had traced with his eyes, the triangle, the circle, the line. A Peverell has drawn upon the magic of the house, not a wand charm, not a schoolboy's trick. The magic of the house, the old inheritance, the deep water, that has not happened in this bank's memory. It has happened now. And it has happened in the body of a child, for the entry has the taste of a child's magic on it, raw and unschooled and vast. What is your instruction, master? Ragnok was quiet. Somewhere in the black stone a vein of ore hummed, felt more than heard, the pulse of the deep places. We do nothing that can be seen, he said finally. The child is young and unknowing, and if the thinning of the name is any guide, unprotected among men who are not his own. There will be others who feel what we have felt in time. The waking of a thing so old does not stay quiet forever, and not all who come to it will come as we come, in honor, remembering the bargain. We will not draw eyes to him by our attention, but we will not be blind to him either. Send an inquiry, the old way, discreet, deniable, and bound so that only his hand can open it. Let it find him and take his measure and come back to us. If he is what the account says he is, the bank has a debt of watchfulness to the oldest coin it keeps, and we will pay it quietly until the day he is grown enough to be told what he is. And if others find him first, the elder's gray face did not change, but something moved behind the old eyes, something patient and hard and very old. Then they will discover, said Ragnok, that the bank remembers its friends. Go, send the inquiry. And Nagnok, the archivist, paused at the door. Well done to feel it, 200 years on the shelves, and your hand still knows a waking when it passes one. That is worth more than gold. That is worth remembering. Nagnok bowed and went, and the elder sat alone with the ledger in the smokeless light, and did not open it again, but kept his hands upon the mark, and listened to the deep places hum, and thought his slow, deep thoughts about a child of the oldest house who had, somewhere above the stone, begun to wake. Harry, who knew nothing of black chambers or gray hands or debts of watchfulness, was learning that spring how to be invisible in a classroom. He had started at the infant school in the autumn, and it had sat ill with him at first, a knot under the ribs each morning at the gate, because a classroom was a room full of eyes, and the whole of his art was to keep eyes off him. But the book had helped. The book always helped. On the night before his first day it had opened warm and steady and talked him through it, not with charms, for the book was stern about charms worked where men could see, but with counsel, which the book held to be the higher magic and the harder. You will want to hide, it had told him. That is well, hide, but learn the difference between hiding and vanishing. A child who vanishes is noticed for the vanishing. A child who is simply quiet, simply neat, simply neither first nor last at anything, simply forgettable in the good clean way of a person who gives no trouble, that child is safe and free and left alone to watch and to learn. Be that child, you are already half of it, I will teach you the other half. So Harry learned to be forgettable. He learned to answer when asked and not before, to be right often enough that the teacher was satisfied and wrong often enough that Dudley, who was in the other class and heard things, had nothing to carry home. He learned to eat his packed lunch, such as it was, in the corner of the yard where the drain pipe made a warm patch of wall, and to trade the lonely for the peaceful, which is a poor trade and a common one and better than nothing at all. He read everything. That was the one hunger he could not hide and did not try to, because reading in a school was the one greed that drew no punishment. He read the reading scheme books in a week and then read them again for the pictures, and then read the wall charts and the labels on the drawers, and the spines of the books the teacher kept on the high shelf that were meant for the older children, and when he had read those he read them a second time in his head at night in the cupboard by the light of the little sun while the book listened. The trouble came, as it does, from someone bigger. There was a child in the year above named Piers, a narrow, clever, unkind child who ran in Dudley's orbit, and had learned from Dudley that the small, dark boy with the taped glasses was fair game and unlikely to tell. Piers made a study of him in the mean way that unkind children make studies. He learned that Harry flinched from raised hands and went still and downcast when cornered, and he learned that no adult in that school would take the small boy's word over his own, and armed with these two facts he set about the small pleasures of cruelty that fill the hours of children who have not been taught better. On a wet Tuesday in March, Piers cornered Harry by the cloakroom pegs at the end of the day and took the book from Harry's bag. It was not the book. It was not the great warm ledger from the cupboard. That never left the far dark corner, and Harry would sooner have cut off his hand than carry it into the daylight. It was a library book, a proper school library book, borrowed with a real card, a fat green book of Norse myths with a ship on the cover, and Harry had waited 2 weeks for it to come back from another child and had had it for one day, and it was his. And he guarded the few things that were his, even a thing that was his for only a day, with a quiet ferocity that had nowhere else to go. Piers held it up over his head, laughing, and Harry reached for it, and Piers threw it, and it went into the puddle that had gathered under the leaking cloakroom window and landed open, face down, in the gray water. Harry felt the thing wake in him. It came up the way it always came, out of the deep water of himself, and this time it did not come cold and hard like the guard. It came hot. Piers had reached down to grind the book further into the puddle with his shoe, laughing still, and the shoe never reached it because the puddle moved. Harry felt himself want the book out of the water with a want so total that the whole of him bent to it, and the gray puddle heaved and lifted, and the green book rose up out of it dripping and turned itself over in the air and shed its water in a bright hard rain that flew sideways, all of it, every drop, into Piers, who staggered back with his clever unkind face suddenly streaming in his mouth an O of shock, and the book dry, entirely dry, its pages unmarked. Its ship sailing on its cover as though it had never left the shelf, settled itself down into Harry's outstretched hands. For the space of a heartbeat the cloakroom was silent but for the drip of the ordinary tap. Piers looked at the streaming water on his own clothes and at the dry book in Harry's hands, and something happened in his narrow face, some working of the mind toward a conclusion it could not reach, because there was no ordinary conclusion to reach, and a mind that cannot conclude reaches instead for the nearest feeling. And the nearest feeling was the one the book had warned Harry of, the one that made adults cruel, the cold recoil from a thing that should not be. "Freak," Piers said, backing away, wet and wide-eyed. "You did that, you freak," and he turned and ran, splashing out into the wet playground, to find Dudley, to find someone to make the strangeness into a story that could be told, and so made ordinary and so made bearable. Harry stood in the cloakroom with the dry book in his hands and understood that he had done a very dangerous thing. That night the book did not scold him. He had expected scolding. He had rehearsed his defense all through the silent walk home and the silent supper, the "you said not to be seen" and the "I couldn't help it," and he laid his hand on the triangle braced for the sternness, and the sternness did not come. "Tell me," said the voice, gentle, and Harry told it, all of it, the puddle and the water and the word Piers had thrown, and the book listened to the end without a word, and when Harry had run down into silence the gold gathered warm and close. "You kept a thing of yours from being spoiled by someone who spoils things for the pleasure of it," the voice said. "I will not tell you that was wrong. I have watched your line for 1,000 years, and I have never once seen the wrong in a child defending what is his from a cruel hand. What I will tell you is harder than right and wrong, and you are old enough now to hold it, so hold it. You were seen. The seeing cannot be unseen. That is the true cost, and you will pay it not tonight but over the days to come, in how the narrow child looks at you, and the story he will tell, and the eyes that story will turn your way. This is the world you were born into, Harry, and it is time you knew its shape. There are those who, meeting a marvel, want to tend it, and those who, meeting a marvel, want to break it or own it, and you will not always be able to tell which is which by looking, and getting it wrong will cost you dearly. So you will learn to be careful. Not furtive, careful, there is all the difference between the two, and I will not have you confuse them. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Harry said, the true yes. And then, because the book had never lied to him, and so he could bring it the things he could not bring anyone, he called me a freak. Piers did. Aunt Petunia says it too. Is that what this is, the freak thing? The gold went very still. When the voice came again it had dropped low, into the deep register Harry had learned meant that the words to follow were to be kept forever. Listen to me and keep this against every day they say it, for they will say it, and it will wear at you if you let it, and I will not let it. A freak is a thing outside its own kind, a thing wrong in its own nature, a thing that ought not to be. You are the opposite of that. You are the truest example of your own kind that has walked this island in 100 years. You are not outside your nature, you are more fully inside it than any child I have taught since your line was young. When they call you freak, they are naming the thing in themselves that shrinks from you, not your nature, for the small and the cornered have always called the large and the free by ugly names, so as not to have to look at what they themselves are not. You are not a freak, Harry Potter, you are a Peverell. The word they should be reaching for if they had the eyes to see you is not freak, it is heir. Harry sat with that a long moment in the gold light, holding the green library book, dry and whole, against his chest. Heir, he said, trying the shape of it as he had tried Peverell. Heir, the voice agreed. Now dry your face, though there is nothing on it but the dark, and let me teach you a thing that will keep the narrow child and all his kind from ever cornering you again, not by fighting them, which you must not, but by seeing them coming, which you may. It is an old art and a subtle one, and your line was famous for it. It is the reading of what a person is under what a person shows. Give me your hand. And so, through the wet end of that spring, while the story Piers told did its slow work, and the children of the school learned to give the small dark boy a wider berth, and the wider berth turned out to be, though Harry did not say so, very nearly a mercy, the book taught Harry to see. Not to see through walls or into the future, for those were tricks, and the book did not teach tricks. To see people. To read the true thing under the shown thing, the flinch under the swagger, the hunger under the sneer, the kindness a shy person hid because kindness had once been used against them. It was not a magic of wands or words. It was a magic of attention. The book said the oldest attention, the attention a hunted thing pays to the wood, sharpened and turned and made a gift instead of a wound. Harry took to it as he took to everything the book gave him, hungrily and well. He began to see. He saw that his teacher, Mrs. Cole, who was sharp and tired and had no patience for the class, went soft and slow at the fish tank when she thought no one watched, and he understood that she was kinder than she let herself be, because kindness in that room was a thing that got you eaten. He saw that Dudley, mountainous, spoiled, terrible Dudley, was underneath, a child hemmed in two, flinching from his father's temper and smothered by his mother, and beginning to sense that the world outside his gate would not treat him as the center of things, as his gate had taught him to expect, and Harry found, seeing this, that he could not go on holding his cousin in contempt, which was inconvenient and true. And he saw Piers and understood him and stopped flinching from him, and the day Harry stopped flinching from him was the day Piers, feeling the change without understanding it, gave up tormenting him at all, for the whole of Piers's pleasure had been in the flinch, and a child who no longer flinches gives a cruel one nothing. The sight did more than shield him. It began in its quiet way to make him kind, which the book said was the whole point and the only safe use of seeing another person to the root. There was a girl in his class, a thin, silent, chapped-handed child named Sophie, who sat where Harry sat at the edge of everything, and whom the others ignored as thoroughly as they ignored Harry, and one gray afternoon Harry, looking at her with the new sight, saw that she was not sullen as the teacher thought, but hungry, plainly and simply hungry, a hunger he knew from the inside, and that she hid it as he hid things, under a dull, careful face. He did not make a scene of it. He had learned better than anyone alive how not to make a person small for a need. He simply took to leaving half of whatever poor lunch he was given on the low wall by the drainpipe when he got up, left there like something forgotten, in a spot only Sophie passed, and walking away without a backward look. And by the third day the food was always gone when he glanced back the next morning, and by the end of the week Sophie caught his eye across the yard once, only once, and gave him the ghost of a nod, one edge of everything child to another, and neither of them ever said a word about it. Which was exactly how Harry would have wanted it done for him. It was the first thing he had ever given anyone. It cost him half his lunch, and he was hungrier for it, and he did it every day until term ended and counted himself the richer. The book had been right. Seeing them coming was better than fighting them. It was so much better that Harry, 6 years old that summer, began in the safe dark to feel something he had no room for before, which was the beginning of his own strength, banked and quiet, like the little sun banked in his cupped hand. School let out for the summer, and the long light evenings came, and with them a new lesson, the deepest the book had yet trusted him with. It began with a question. Harry had taken to asking questions of the book as he had once only asked them of the spider, which is to say without expecting answers and grateful past speech to get them. And one warm night, lying with his palm on the open page, he asked why the coin from his birthday memory, the warm gold of his parents' house, had felt so much like the sound of his own name. The gold light stirred, pleased, as it stirred whenever he asked a thing worth answering. Because a name is not a label, Harry, though this house has taught you to think it one, the voice said. They have given you a name here, painted it on a card and stuck it to a cupboard door, and by it they mean the thing under the stairs, the extra mouth, the trouble. That is not a name, that is a leash. A true name is another matter entirely, and it is among the oldest and most dangerous magics there are, and your house was its keeper before it was the keeper of anything else, so attend and take this slowly, for it is deep water, and I will not have you out of your depth in it before you can swim." Harry lay still and listened. Above him a moth knocked softly and steadily against the little sun, which he had let float free tonight, and the dry tick of it was the only other sound. "Everything that is," the voice went on, "has a true name, which is not the name we call it by, but the name it is. The name it is the whole of it, its nature said in a word, and to know a thing's true name is to know the thing entire, past its disguises, past its shows. When you mended the cup, you found the cup's true name without knowing you did. You found what the cup truly was, which was whole, under what it seemed, which was broken, and you called it back to its truth. When you laid the not seeing over me, you did the reverse. You hid my true name under a false one, dressed me as rubbish, and rubbish is what the eye believed. Names are the handles of the world. He who holds a thing's true name holds the thing. So if I knew a person's true name," Harry said slowly, working it out in the dark, "I'd know everything about them." "You would know them to the root," said the voice, "and if you were cruel, you could bind them by it, or wound them by it, or turn them by it, which is why the true names of people are the most guarded secrets there are, and why the giving of one's true name to another is the deepest trust two souls can share, deeper than any vow, for a vow can be broken, and a true name, once given, cannot be taken back. Your parents knew each other's. That is what a marriage was once, before it was rings and paper, two people trading the one word that undid all their armor and choosing to stand unarmored on purpose forever before each other. That is the true old magic of names, and it is a magic of trust, and it will keep you or unmake you by how well you learn it." Harry turned this over a long while, the moth ticking, the little sun turning. "Do I have one?" he asked at last. "A true name?" "You do," said the voice, and it went very gentle. "And here's why I have told you all of this tonight when you are only 6, before you are truly ready, because it cannot wait for ready. You must guard it. You do not know it yet, not to say, and that is well, for what you cannot say you cannot let slip. But it is in you, and it is a great one, greater than most, for you are the last of a house that was old when true names were young, and there will come those who want it. Not the narrow child at school, he is nothing. I mean the ones who feel a great name waking, as the goblins felt it, and come toward it, and some will come to tend and some will come to own, and the ones who come to own will covet your name above all things, because with it they could make of you a key to open any door. So this is my charge to you, and I lay it on you as your fathers laid it on their sons. Never give your true name to any soul you have not first trusted with your unarmored life, not for kindness, not for the promise of anything, no matter how great the promise. Do you take the charge?" "I take it," Harry said, and did not fully understand it, and understood that it was one of the great serious things, and held it as he held the cup in the birthday and the word air. "Good," said the voice, and the sternness went out of it and the warmth came back. "That is enough of deep water for one night. Come, I will show you something to lie easier on. Go and look at the flower pot." Puzzled, Harry padded to the cupboard door and eased it open and looked out through the dark hall to the kitchen sill, where the cracked pot he had mended and watered all through the winter and spring sat in the last gray light of the summer evening. There, where all season there had been only a green stem and 2 stubborn leaves, was a flower. It had opened that day, small and white and 5-petaled, a weed by any gardener's reckoning, a stitchwort sprung from a seed no one had planted, and it was to Harry the most extraordinary thing he had ever grown, which was to say the only thing, and he stood in the dark doorway and looked at it opening pale in the dusk. "You kept a broken pot and filled it, and watered a thing no one else could be troubled to see," the voice said into the warm room behind his eyes. "And it has answered you as things answer those who tend them. That is the same magic as all the rest, the mending and the guarding and the naming, only smaller and gentler and easier to believe. You are a keeper. It was in your blood before ever it was in your book. Give the flower a name and go to sleep." Harry looked at the small white flower a long moment. "Lily," he said, though he did not know why the name came, only that it came as Peverell had come, from the empty shape in him that knew things his mind did not. "I'll call it Lily." And in the cupboard the book went very, very still and did not tell him, not that night, not for years, why the name he had reached for in the dark and given to the first thing he ever grew was the name his mother had carried into the loud, warm house on the night that he was born. The inquiry came in the last week of the summer, and it came, of all the ways it might have come, as a coin. Harry found it on the pavement outside number 4 on a gray Thursday, walking back from the corner shop where he had been sent for his aunt's magazine. It lay in the gutter, half under a fallen leaf, and it caught his eye because it was the wrong color for money, too dark, too warm, more the color of old honey than of any coin in his aunt's purse, and because when his eye fell on it, it seemed to Harry that it wanted to be found, which was a strange thing to feel about a coin, and he had learned that summer to trust the strange things he felt. He picked it up. It was heavy. Far heavier than its size, a small heavy weight in his palm, and it was warm, warm as the book was warm, warm as a thing that had been held though it had been lying in a cold gutter. On one face there was a shape he did not know, an eye with lines coming off it, the mark of some maker he could not read. On the other face there was writing, close and fine, and in no alphabet Harry had ever met, curling letters that seemed to shift very slightly when he was not looking straight at them. And as he turned the coin, the writing turned to face him, and though he could not read it, he understood, in the wordless way he understood the strange things, that the coin was asking him a question, and that the question was, "Whose hand holds me?" He did not stand and stare. The new sight the book had given him worked on more than people. It worked on the street, and the street told him, in the prickle at the back of his neck, that a warm coin in a cold gutter outside his own front door on the very day he had been sent out was not an accident, and that a thing that was not an accident might be watched. So he did what a forgettable child does with a found coin. He turned it over once, dull-faced, the way any child turns a found penny, and he slipped it into his pocket, and he walked onto the door and let himself in and put his aunt's magazine on the arm of her chair without a word, and he did his afternoon chores with the coin burning quietly against his hip, and he did not once take it out, though the wanting to was a live thing in him all the long gray afternoon. Only when the house had gone dark and still, and Dudley's snores came steady through the wall, and the bar of hall light lay pale across his floor, did Harry take the coin out into the cupboard and lay his palm on the worn triangle, and bring the warm gold thing at last to the one presence in the world he trusted to tell him what it was. "Show me," said the voice, the moment his palm touched the triangle, and the gold came up quick and interested. Harry opened his hand in the light, and the coin lay there gleaming, dark honey and warm, and the fine shifting writing turned itself to face the open page, and the book was silent for a moment, reading it. When the voice came again there was something new in it, an alertness, a straightening, the attention of a very old thing that has felt a very old signal. "Well," it said softly, "so they have found you already, sooner than I looked for. That is either very good or very dangerous, and it will take a wiser head than mine to say which, and I am the wisest head you have, so let us reason it out together. Do you know what this is, Harry?" "A coin," Harry said, "but warm, and it feels like it's asking me something." "It is asking you something," the voice agreed. "It is asking whose hand holds it, and it is bound so that it will answer only to one hand, and if any hand but that one had picked it up out of the gutter it would have felt nothing but a cold dull disk and dropped it and forgotten it and gone on. It came warm to you, it turned its face to you, it asked you its question, which means it already suspects the answer, which means it was made and sent by someone who suspects who you are. This is goblin work, child. The finest goblin work, the old binding, the kind that is not made cheaply nor sent without cause. The goblins of the bank have felt your waking, and they have sent this to be sure of you." Harry looked at the coin and then at the gold light, and the thing rising in him was the thing the book had named for him on his birthday, and under it, brighter, newer, was something he would later learn to call wonder. "Goblins," he said, "are they? Should I be wary of them?" "No," said the voice, and it said it plainly, without hedging, which the book did only when it was certain. "Not of these. Hear me, for what I tell you now about the goblins you will need for the whole of your life, and men will tell you otherwise, and men will be wrong. The goblins are not your enemies. They are not your servants either, and they will never be, and any wizard who treats them as servants is a fool who has forgotten his history and will pay for the forgetting. The goblins are the keepers. They keep the gold and they keep the count, and above all they keep their word, which is a thing rarer among men than among any other people I have known. A goblin who has given his oath will die before he breaks it, and a goblin who is owed a debt will remember it 1,000 years, and a goblin who names you friend has named you friend past the grave. They stand on their honor, and they are old, older in their way than your own house, and they do not count wizards friends who have wronged them often. But they keep the old bargains, and your house, Harry, your house kept faith with the goblins when the world was young, and they have not forgotten it, though every wizard alive has. This coin is not a threat, it is a courtesy. It is the goblins, in their careful, ceremonious way, knocking at your door. What do they want, to be sure of you, said the voice. And I think to watch over you, though they would not put it so warmly, for goblins do not deal in warmth, they deal in debts, and they have reckoned in their deep, careful books that they owe your house a debt of watchfulness, and they mean to pay it. That is the goblin way of loyalty, Harry, not a soft word, but a debt honored to the last coin. You could do a great deal worse for a guardian in the world beyond this cupboard than the goblins of the bank, and there are years yet before you can walk into that world and claim what is yours, and in those years it is no small thing to have the keepers of the deep places counting themselves in your debt. Harry turned the coin over, and the fine writing turned to face him, patient, warm, asking still its single question. How do I answer it? He asked. It wants to know whose hand holds it. How do I tell it? You have already told it, said the voice gently. You told it when you picked it up and it came warm to you and you did not drop it. But if you wish to answer it in words in the way that will carry back to the ones who sent it and let them know their inquiry has found its mark and been understood, then close your hand around it and warm it with the warmth you know how to make, the mending warmth, the warmth of the little sun, and think clearly once the truest name you have. Not the name they gave you here, the name that is yours, you know it now. Say it into the coin and it will carry it home. Harry closed his hand around the warm coin. He called up the warmth he had made on his first night in the world of the book, the mending warmth, the warmth that had woken all of this, and he let it flow down his arm and into his fist and into the coin, and the coin drank it and grew warmer, and Harry thought clearly once into the metal, the truest name he had, the name that fit the empty shape in him, the name of the great old house that had come for him in the dark. Peverell. The coin flared. It flared gold in his closed fist so that the light of it shone red through the flesh of his fingers, and it was warm as a held ember but did not burn, and Harry felt it take the name and the warmth and fold them into itself and go still, its question answered, its errand done. When he opened his hand, the shifting writing had changed. Where there had been a question, there was now a single word in the curling script, and though Harry could not read the script, he did not need to, because the book read it for him softly in the gold light of the cupboard under the stairs. Acknowledged, the book translated. That is what it says now, Harry. Acknowledged. You have answered them, and they have their answer, and somewhere under the city a very old goblin is being told this hour that the last of the oldest house is awake, and knows his name, and has spoken it clean into the oldest binding without a tremor. You have done a great thing tonight, and you did not break a single window doing it, which is more than most wizards twice your age could say. Keep the coin. It is yours now, truly yours, warmed by your own hand and named with your own name. It will find you again when they have need to reach you. Until then it will keep, as all my gifts keep, sleep, small air. You have knocked back at the world, and the world has heard, and that is enough turning of the wheel for one night. Harry lay down on his cot with the warm coin in one hand and his other palm resting on the closed book, and above him the house slept and knew nothing, and below him the deep places hummed with news, and in the black stone chamber under the city, an old goblin named Ragnarok received a small warm coin brought up warm from the surface world by a raven that owed him a debt, and read the name folded into it, and the warmth, and the clean, untrembling strength of a child who had answered the oldest binding on the first asking, and he set the coin down upon the sleeping ledger of the house of Peverell, and he did a thing that goblins do perhaps once in a generation, a thing his archivist, watching from the door, would remember to the end of his 200 further years. He inclined his old gray head to a name. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The visitor under the stairs. The coin woke him a little before midnight, and Harry knew, the moment he closed his hand on it in the dark, that the world was coming to his door at last. He had kept it a year, near enough. It had lain quiet against him through the autumn he turned 7, a warm, honey-colored secret in the seam of his cot, and he had grown used to the weight of it, the way you grow used to a heartbeat. Tonight it was not quiet. It pulsed slow and warm and deliberate, once and then again, like a knuckle rapping soft on wood, and the fine shifting writing on its face had turned itself so that a new word lay uppermost, and Harry could not read the goblin's script, but he did not need to, because the book, when he laid the coin on its open page, read it for him. Tonight the voice translated, and the gold came up alert and steady. It says, tonight, they are sending someone to you, Harry, in person. That is a great courtesy and a greater risk for them and for you, and it means they have taken your measure from afar and found it worth the crossing. Now listen to me, and listen well, for you will have one chance to do this rightly and a lifetime to regret doing it wrong. I am going to teach you how to receive a guest. Harry sat up on the cot with the coin warm in his palm and the little sun kindling above it without his asking. There is a magic in hospitality, the voice went on, and it had gone into the deep register, the keeping register, the one for things that must last. It is a cousin of the threshold magic that guarded you from your uncle, and it is older than any law men have written down. When a stranger comes to your door and you take them in, and give them of your warmth and your water and your bread, a bond is made between you that neither may break without dishonor, and under that bond no harm may pass from host to guest or from guest to host while the guest is under the roof. The goblins hold this magic sacred above almost all others. They will judge you by it. If you receive their messenger well in the old way, with courtesy and with a gift of what little you have, you will have told them in a language older than words that you are what the coin says you are, not a spoiled wizard child who thinks the world is owed to him, but an heir of the old house who remembers. But I've nothing to give, Harry whispered. I haven't anything. It's all theirs, even the cupboard's theirs. You have the cup, said the voice gently. You have clean water warmed by your own hand. You have the little sun for light in a dry place, and your own courtesy, which costs nothing and is worth more than gold to those who can tell true courtesy from flattery, and goblins can tell it in the dark with their eyes shut. Hospitality is not measured by the wealth of what is given, Harry. It is measured by the giving of what you have. A king who gives a guest a feast from a full storehouse has given less, by the old reckoning, than a starving child who gives half his only crust. You are the second. Give what you have, and give it as though it were a feast, and you will have given more than any lord in England could. So Harry made ready to receive his guest. He was 7 years old, and he prepared the cupboard under the stairs the way a great house prepares for a king. He swept the floor with his hands, gathering the dust into a corner. He set the mended cup, with its scar of deeper white, in the middle of the cleared space, and filled it at the bathroom tap on tiptoe, and carried it back without spilling, and warmed it between his palms until a thread of steam rose off it. He straightened his blanket. He set the little sun to float steady at the height of a candle, gold and unwavering, and he sat down cross-legged on the swept floor with the book open beside him and the coin warm in his hand, and he waited, small and upright and ready, and did not fidget, because a host does not fidget. At midnight the coin went cold. It went cold all at once, the warmth draining out of it between one breath and the next, and Harry understood without being told that this was the knock, that the messenger had come to the edge of whatever concealment had carried him across the sleeping town, and stood now on the threshold asking leave to enter. He rose to his knees. He had asked the book what to say, and the book had told him, and he said it now into the dark of the cupboard in a clear, steady whisper. "You are welcome under this roof," Harry said. "Come in and be safe here and take of what I have." The air by the cupboard door folded. There is no better word for it. The dark did not part or shimmer or tear. It folded like a page turning, and where there had been the low slope of the underside of the stairs, there was now a figure kneeling. For the ceiling was too low to stand, a figure no taller kneeling than Harry was sitting, wrapped in a traveling cloak the gray of wet slate, with a face the color and texture of old oak and eyes black and bright and deep-set under a heavy brow, and long clever fingers folded before him, and about him the smell of cold stone and iron and something dry and ancient. Like the inside of a library or a tomb, Harry looked at the goblin and the goblin looked at Harry, and neither of them spoke for a moment, and the little sun turned gold above them and lit them both. "I am Nagnok," said the goblin at last. His voice was low and precise, each word set down whole, with edges. "Keeper of the deep records of the bank you call Gringotts. I have walked the sleeping shelves 200 years, and I have crossed the sleeping town this night on an errand I did not look to be given in my lifetime." His black eyes moved once about the cupboard, taking in the swept floor and the thin blanket and the label on the inside of the door, and something changed in the set of his oaken face, some tightening quickly mastered. "You are the one who woke the account." "I don't know about accounts," Harry said honestly, "but I woke the book. Or the book woke because of me, and I said my name into the coin. If that's the thing you mean, then yes, that was me." "That was you," Nagnok agreed. He regarded Harry a while longer. "You are younger than I was told, and smaller, and you have laid out water for a guest." His gaze went to the mended cup, steaming faintly in the middle of the swept floor, and stayed there, and when it came back to Harry there was a new weight in it. "In the old form, warmed by your own hand." "Do you know what you have done, child, laying out water so?" "I've made you welcome," Harry said. "The book taught me it's the old way. It means no harm can pass between us while you're under the roof, and I meant it, so it's true." He picked up the cup in both hands and held it out across the swept floor, steady, not spilling. "You've come a long way in the cold. Please, it's yours." Nagnok did not move for the space of 3 slow breaths. Then he reached out with both his long, clever hands, as a thing of ceremony is received, and took the cup from Harry's hands, and inclined his head over it, and drank. He drank all of it to the bottom, which is the courtesy of the guest as the offering is the courtesy of the host, and he set the empty cup down in the center of the floor with great care, turning it so that its mended scar faced Harry, and he looked at the child across it, and when he spoke his voice had changed, had gained a formality, a resonance, the sound of words that carry weight in the deep places. "I have taken water of your giving under your roof," Nagnok said, "and by the old bond there is peace between us, you and I, and between your house and mine this night and after. Gringotts has not shared water with the house of Peverell in 11 generations of men. I did not think to be the one to renew it. It is renewed." He pressed one long hand flat to his own chest over the slate-gray cloak. "You have done rightly, heir of the old house, more than rightly. You have done it as though you were raised to it, and I am told you were raised to nothing in a cupboard by people not your own, and that makes the doing of it a marvel, and I do not use that word carelessly, for my people do not." Harry did not know what to say to that, so he said the true thing, which was usually best. "The book raised me," he said. "The book, and I suppose whatever's in my blood that the book says is there. I've been in the cupboard, that part's true, but I haven't been raised to nothing. I've been raised to this." He touched the open book beside him, the worn triangle warm under his fingers. "It's just that nobody knew." Something moved again in the goblin's deep-set eyes, and this time he did not master it entirely, and Harry, who had a year's practice now at seeing the true thing under the shown thing, saw it clearly, and it was the beginning of respect. "Then the book has raised you well," Nagnok said, "better than gold could now. I am sent to take your measure and to bring you word, and I have taken your measure, and I will not insult you by pretending the taking was not the greater part of my errand. You have passed it. You passed it before you spoke, when you swept a floor you did not own to receive a stranger you had no cause to trust. You passed it when you gave your only water warmed. You passed it in every particular by which my people judge a soul, and I will carry that measure back to my master, who is old and careful and not easily moved, and who will count it good news in the deep slow way of our kind to hear it. But the word I bring you is longer than the measure, and harder, and you must hear it whole, and the hearing will not be easy. Will you hear it?" "Yes," Harry said, the true yes. And Nagnock, kneeling under the stairs in the light of a small gold sun a 7-year-old had made out of wanting, told Harry Potter for the first time in words who he was. He told it plainly, without softening, for goblins do not soften, and the plainness was its own kind of respect. He told Harry that he was the last living heir of the elder line of the House of Peverell, the oldest house whose gold Gringotts kept, older than the founders of the wizard's school, old as the first families who had drawn the first circles of safety in the dirt when the forests came down to the sea. He told him that the name had thinned and passed sideways down the centuries into the House of Potter, and that Harry was a Potter too, and that the Potters were an old and honorable house in their own right, well thought of, brave, and not poor. He told him that Harry had a vault in the bank, his own, left to him, full of the gold his parents had not lived to spend, waiting behind a door that only his hand or his key could open, and that it would keep untouched and safe, guarded by the oldest locks the goblins knew how to forge, until the day Harry was grown enough to walk into the deep places and claim it. And he told Harry because Harry asked, in a voice that had gone very small in the gold light, how his parents had died. Nagnock was quiet a moment. He looked at the book, and the book's gold pulsed once at permission, and the goblin turned his black eyes back to the child. "Not in a car," he said. "That is a lie told to you by small people to make a great thing small enough for them to carry. Your parents did not die in any car. They were killed, both of them, on one night, defending you by a dark wizard, the darkest of the age, who came to your cradle to end your line and ended theirs instead and could not touch you. What turned his curse we do not fully know, and the wizards do not fully know, and they have made much of it and understood little. My people have a guess, and I will give it to you, for you have earned truth this night, and I will not feed you comfort in its place. We think the old magic of your house woke that night, for the space of a heartbeat, the same deep water you drew upon at the age of 4, and stood between you and the dark, and sent it screaming out of the world. We think your book, wherever it slept, stirred in its sleep and knew, as it told you it knew, that the line went on. And we think you have been from that night exactly what the Dark One came to prevent your ever becoming, the heir of the oldest house, alive and awake and growing." Harry sat very still on the swept floor, and the little sun turned above him, and the empty cup sat between them with its scar of white turned to face him, and for a while he did not trust his voice. "They died for me," he said at last. "They died for you," Nagnock said. "That is not a small thing, child. That is the largest thing there is in the old reckoning. A death freely given for the shielding of one's own is the deepest magic your kind or mine has ever known, deeper than names, deeper than thresholds, and it does not end when the one who gave it ends. It stays. It stayed with you. It is, we think, some part of what turned the curse, and it is, I would guess, some part of what your book has been feeding on all these years to keep you warm under this roof. Your mother did not leave you a coward's lie about a car. She left you the greatest guarding one soul can leave another. You should know that. You should carry it as I would carry the standard of my house into the deep." The thing that rose in Harry then he had no cupboard large enough to hold. It had no single name. There was loss in it, and under the loss a fierce brightness, and under that a pull like a tide going out from a shore. If it was any one thing, it was longing, the state of a child who has just been given his parents and lost them again in the same breath, who has learned in a single hour that he was wanted and defended and shielded past death by two people he would never touch, whose faces he could not quite see, whose voices lived only in a birthday memory a book had lent him. He wanted them. He wanted them with the whole of himself, wanted the loud, warm house and the man who laughed on the cracked edge of too much feeling and the woman whose name he had somehow already given to a flower, and the wanting was so large it had no bottom, and he sat under the stairs and let it move through him and did not turn away from it, because the book had taught him not to turn away from true things, no matter how large. Nagnock watched him bear it and did not speak and did not offer comfort, and the not offering was, Harry understood, the goblin's way of honoring that the thing was too large for comfort and did not deserve to be made small. "I have one more thing to give you," Nagnock said when the worst of it had passed through and Harry had come back to his own eyes. "It is not the vault, that keeps for later and you are too young to spend it and too watched to visit it. It is smaller and greater. Hold out your hand." Harry held out his hand. From within the slate-gray cloak, Nagnock drew a thing wrapped in black cloth and unwrapped it and laid it in Harry's open palm, and it was a ring. It was old, older than old, a plain band of some dark heavy metal that was not gold and not silver and not iron, worn smooth by hands 10 centuries gone, and set into it, flush with the band, was a single black stone, and cut into the stone, so fine and so worn that Harry had to turn it to the little sun to see it, was the mark, the triangle, the circle, the line. "This is the signet of the elder line," Nagnock said, very low. "It has lain in the deepest vault of the bank since the last of the elder branch went into the dark, waiting, as the account waited, as the book waited, as you were waited for. It is yours by blood, and it is yours by right, and it is yours now by the water we have shared. But hear me, heir of the old house, and hear me carefully. You may not wear it yet." It is too great for a boy of 7 to carry openly, and there are those who would kill to feel it on a living Peverell hand, for it is a thing of power past the reckoning of most who know its name, and its power is not the kind that performs. Keep it hidden, keep it with the book, which knows how to hide great things in plain sight. Wear it only in the dark, only for yourself, only to know that it is real and you are real and the house is not ended. And when you are grown and strong and ready, it will be time enough to let the world see it on your hand. You understand me? I understand, Harry said, closing his fingers slowly around the ring, feeling the black stone warm against his palm, feeling faint and far and deep. Something in the ring turned toward him and settle as the book had turned toward him, as the coin had, as he thought. Everything old and true in the world seemed to turn toward him once it knew his name. I'll keep it hidden. I'll keep it with the book, thank you, Nagnok, for the truth most of all. Nobody's ever given me the truth before, just the book, and now you. At the word, the book did a thing it had never done in the presence of another living soul. It spoke aloud. Not in ink and not in the warm room behind Harry's eyes where it spoke to him alone, but into the air of the cupboard in a voice that had sound to it at last, low and vast and patient, the voice of a mountain given leave to speak, so that Nagnok heard it too and went very still, his black eyes widening in his oaken face. Keeper of the deep records, the book said, you have done my heir honor tonight, and I have watched, and I do not forget those who do him honor any more than your people forget a debt. I am old, Goblin, I was old when your first shelves were cut. I have not spoken aloud in 300 years, and I break that silence now for one reason which you will carry to your master word, for it concerns him, and it concerns the Count, and it concerns the child between us. Nagnok inclined his head, the deep bow of one ancient thing to a more ancient thing. I will carry it whole, he said. Speak, and I will not lose a syllable of it, though I live another 1,000 years. The waking of this house will not stay quiet, the book said, and the gold of it dimmed and cooled, and there was a weight in the words now that pressed down on the small room. I have hidden him and taught him and guarded him, and the goblins have felt him and come as friends, and the old grey wizard on his tower has felt him and watches, and none of these are the danger. The danger is what else is out there that remembers. There are old things sleeping in the dark places of this island, and hungry things, and a broken thing that will not stay broken, and every one of them will feel in time what the account felt and the coin felt and your 200 years on the shelves felt, that a Peverell is awake and small and not yet strong enough to hold what he is. When they feel it, they will come, not to tend, to own, or to break, or to feed. I will stand between him and all of them as long as there is a page of me left to turn, but I am a book, Goblin, and a book can be burned, and I do not intend to trust his life to my own survival alone. So I ask the bank, through you in the old form for the old thing, watchfulness, not gold, not arms, eyes. In the deep places, in the high places, in the places where old dark things stir, I ask the goblins to keep their eyes open on behalf of the last of the house of Peverell, and to send him word by the coin when the dark begins to move toward him, that he and I may be ready. Will the bank grant it? Nagnok did not answer at once. He was a keeper of records, and a keeper of records does not pledge his people without weighing it. He weighed it there on his knees under the stairs, and Harry watched him weigh it, and then the goblin drew from his belt a small knife of black metal, and pricked the ball of his own thumb, and let a single dark bead of blood fall onto the swept floor between them, which is the deepest and most binding thing a goblin can do, for goblin blood is not spent lightly, and never spent on a promise the giver means to break. The blood I have spilled on your heir's floor, Nagnok said, and his voice rang in the small space. The bank grants it. Watchfulness in the old form, freely given and forever, until the last of the house of Peverell needs it no longer, or the last goblin closes the last ledger, whichever the years decide. I so swear, and my master will honor it, for I will lay it in the great book with my own hand and my own blood beside it, and what is written there in blood is not unwritten while the world stands. It is done, it is bound, let the dark come. It will find the child watched by the oldest bank on earth, and it will find that an unwelcome discovery. The bead of blood on the floor sank into the wood and was gone, taken, sealed, and the little sun flared once, gold and bright, in something like approval. The goblin looked at Harry a long moment in the gold light, and then he did the thing he had done once before, in the black stone chamber under the city, when a warm coin came up from the surface world with a name folded into it, the thing goblins do perhaps once in a generation. The goblin looked at him a long moment in the gold light, and then he did the thing he had done once before in the black stone chamber under the city, when a warm coin came up from the surface world with a name folded into it, the thing goblins do perhaps once in a generation. He bowed his head to the child under the stairs. The bank remembers its friends, Harry Potter, Nagnok said, rising to his knees to depart. And the bank has not, in all its long count, held a friend in higher honor than the one it found tonight, in a cupboard, keeping the old ways with nothing but water and a book and a light he made himself. We will watch over you in our way, which is not soft and will not always be seen, but will always be there. When you have need of the deep places, warm the coin and speak my name, and I will come, or send, and the old bond will hold. Until then, guard the ring, guard the book, and guard, above all, your name. Peace under your roof. I go." And the air folded, and the slate-gray figure was gone, and the smell of cold stone and iron faded slowly from the cupboard, and Harry Potter sat alone on the swept floor with an empty cup and an open book, and in his closed hand the signet of the oldest house in England. Far away, in a circular office at the top of a high tower, in a school Harry had never seen and did not yet know awaited him, a very old wizard woke because one of his instruments had begun, softly, to sing. Albus Dumbledore sat up in the narrow bed behind the bookcase and listened. He knew the voices of his instruments as a shepherd knows his flock, and he knew which of them was singing now. The small silver device, fine as a spider's work, that he had set to watch over the child at Privet Drive, tuned to the ancient blood protection he had anchored there the night he left the child on the doorstep. For 6 years it had turned its slow, quiet turn and told him only what he wished to hear, that the ward held, that the child lived, that the sacrifice of the mother still wrapped the son in a shelter no dark hand could pierce. Tonight it sang a note he had never heard it sing. He rose and drew his robe about him and crossed to the spinning silver thing in its pool of moonlight and bent his crooked nose to it and watched and thought. The ward held. That much the instrument still told him, and it steadied him to know it. But threaded through the old familiar note was a new one, deeper, older, a resonance the device had not been built to name because Dumbledore had not known, when he built it, that there was anything at Privet Drive to produce it. Something at that house was working magic. Not the wild, leaking, accidental magic of an untrained child, which the instrument had registered before as one registers a kettle coming to the boil, and which he had noted and dismissed as the ordinary overflow of a powerful young wizard growing. This was different. This was shaped. This was deep and slow and deliberate and very, very old, and it had a flavor to it that tugged at the far back of Dumbledore's long memory, at things read once in forbidden books and set aside as legend, and he stood in the moonlight and turned the flavor over and could not, for a while, put a name to it. When the name came to him, he went still. He did not move for a long while. He thought of the child he had left on the doorstep, the child he had chosen to raise in obscurity and hardship precisely so that he would grow humble, and kind and unspoiled by fame and ready when the time came, for the burden Dumbledore believed the prophecy had laid upon him. He thought of how carefully he had arranged that childhood, and how little he had visited it, trusting the wards and the aunt and the plan. He thought of the flavor of the magic singing now in his instrument, magic that no aunt could teach and no ward could produce, magic of a house he had believed extinct, and he understood, with the particular cold clarity that came to him at such moments, that something was happening at Privet Drive that he had not arranged, did not control, and did not understand. A younger man would have gone at once. Dumbledore had been young a long time ago and had learned at great cost the price of moving before he understood. He did not go. He stood in the moonlight and reasoned it out, coldly, kindly, the two together, as he did everything. The child was safe, the ward held. Whatever was teaching him was not, by the instrument's reckoning, harming him, and might even be strengthening the very protection Dumbledore relied upon. To move now, to descend on the house, to demand answers, would be to reveal his own hand too early, to frighten a child he needed to trust him later, and perhaps to sever whatever thread was weaving there, which might yet prove useful. And there was this, which Dumbledore acknowledged to himself with the honesty he reserved for his own worst reasoning. He did not yet know whether the thing waking in the child served his plan or endangered it, and until he knew, watching cost him nothing and acting might cost him everything. So he would watch, he would tune the instrument finer. He would have a quiet word with Arabella, who already, he saw from the note on his desk, had written to say the child looked less peaky and more, she could not say what, more awake. He would set his patience against the mystery, as he had set it against 100 mysteries, and he would wait for the shape of it to show. It was the wise course. It was the kind course even, for it left the child his peace a while longer. Dumbledore told himself all of this, standing in the moonlight, and it was all true, and he was too honest and too old not to feel, under the truth, the small cold draft of the other thing, which was that a boy he had meant to keep humble and hidden independent had, somehow in a cupboard, without permission, begun to become something Dumbledore had not planned for him to become, and that this ought to be watched not only for the child's sake, but for the sake of the plan, and that the two sakes were not, perhaps, as perfectly aligned as he had always assured himself they were. He put the thought away gently where he put such thoughts. He turned the instrument's key a quarter turn finer, and he went back to his bed, an old man with a long game to play, and did not sleep, and watched the moon go down. 3 streets away at number 6 Privet Drive, Arabella Figg had not slept either, though she could not have said why. She was a squib, which is to say she had been born to magic and given none, and had made her peace with it long ago in the only way the peace could be made, by being useful to the world that had passed her by. Dumbledore had asked her years back to keep an eye on the Potter child, and she had done it faithfully, watching from her window and her doorstep in the wrong end of a great many cups of tea, and reporting what little there was to report, which for years had been very little. A thin, quiet, downcast child, too small for his clothes, who flinched at raised voices and never once complained, and whom she had not been able to help beyond the smell of cabbage and the slow turning of her photograph albums, for helping openly would have broken the very concealment she was set to guard. But she had magic-born eyes, for all she had no magic of her own, and magic-born eyes see a little further than most, and this past year they had seen a change in the child that she had put in her letters and could not quite name. He no longer flinched, that was the first of it. He walked to the shops for his aunt with his head up and his eyes open, taking in the street, and there was a steadiness to him that had not been there, a way of being wholly present that most grown men never manage and no neglected 7-year-old had any business having. Once, passing her gate, he had stopped and looked at her sideways and said, "Your gray cat's poorly, Mrs. Figg," in her chest. "You should keep her warm," and walked on, and the gray cat had indeed sickened in the chest not 3 days after, and Arabella had kept her warm on his word, and the cat had lived, and Arabella had gone indoors and sat down hard in her chair and not known what to make of it at all. Tonight she stood at her dark window with a shawl about her shoulders and looked down the sleeping street toward number 4, and the hair on her arms was standing up the way it did near Strong Magic, the way it had not stood up in that street in all her years of watching, and she could not see anything. There was nothing to see, only the dark house and the dark drive and the street lamp humming, but she felt it, the way a deaf woman feels the organ through the floor of the church. A great slow music of power playing somewhere she could not reach. She went to her table and lit her lamp and took up her pen and wrote to Dumbledore for the second time that year. "Something is happening with the Potter child," she wrote, and then crossed out the Potter child, for it seemed suddenly the wrong words for what she had felt, and wrote instead with Harry, and sat looking at the correction a long moment before she went on. "I cannot tell you what. Only that he is not what he was, and the street feels different at night, and my old bones say to tell you, so I am telling you. He is not in trouble that I can see. If anything, he seems the opposite, but you should know. AF." She sealed it and set it for the morning post and put out her lamp and did not sleep, and neither, as it happened, did anyone else that night who had felt the old magic wake, save the one small person at the heart of it, who slept sound. In the cupboard under the stairs, Harry laid the ring against the book's worn cover, and the book took it, folding the not seeing over it as it had folded over itself, so that a hand reaching into that dark corner would find only a ruined ledger and never feel the signet of 1,000 years pressed into its spine. "You did everything rightly," the voice said, soft and full in the warm dark, "everything. I have watched your line receive kings and archmages and the envoys of powers I will not name to you yet, and I have never watched one of them receive a guest better than you received Nagnok tonight, with nothing in a cupboard at 7 years old. Your parents would have wept to see it. I nearly did in my way, which is a thing books cannot do, so you will have to take the wanting to for the deed." Before he lay down, he did one thing more. Drew the ring back out of the book's hiding only for a moment, and held it up to the little sun, and turned the black stone until the worn mark caught the light, the triangle, the circle, the line. It was the same mark that lay on the book's cover, and the same that had been tooled small on the ledger's spine under the city, and Harry looked from the ring to the book and back and asked the question he had been carrying since the first night. "What does it mean?" he said. "This mark, it's on everything of ours." "It means 3 things and 1 thing," the voice said, and there was a care in it, a slowing, the tone it took at the edge of deep water. "And you are not ready for the whole of it, and I will not pour more into you tonight than one heart should hold in a single evening, for you have held a great deal already and held it well, but I will give you the shape of it to grow toward. Long ago there were 3 brothers of our house, and they did a thing no others of our kind have done before or since, a thing to do with the oldest power of all, the one men shrink from most and understand least, and out of that doing came 3 great works of magic, and this mark is their sign, and our house has carried it ever since as both a crown and a burden. The ring you hold is bound up in that story. So is the light in your hand, so in a way you will not understand for years, are you? That is all for tonight, put it away. When you are older and stronger I will tell you the whole of it, and it will be the greatest story you have ever heard, because it is true, and because it is yours." Harry looked at the mark a moment longer, and then he slid the ring back into the book's keeping, and felt the not-seeing fold over it, and the corner of the cupboard held nothing once more but a ruined old ledger no thief would trouble to lift. Harry lay down with his hand on the closed book and the little sun turning low above him, and he thought about the loud warm house, and the man who laughed, and the woman whose name was a flower on a windowsill, and how they had stood between him and the dark and paid for it with everything they had so that he could be here 7 years old, warm and awake and wanted. "Will I ever have it?" he asked the dark. "A house that's warm like that, with people in it, that's mine." The book was quiet a moment, and when it answered it did not lie to him, because it never lied to him, and the not lying was the whole of why he believed it. "I do not know all that will come," the voice said. "I am old and I have seen far, but the future is the one country even I cannot read. I know this, though, and I give it to you to hold against the dark the way you hold the cup and the birthday and the word air. You are made for a warm house full of people who are yours. It is written in you deeper than any curse. The cold years are the accident, Harry. The warmth is the truth. Hold on, grow, keep the old ways. And one day, I think, sooner than these long gray years have taught you to expect, you will walk out of this cupboard and into the world that has been waiting for you as I waited for you, and you will build the warm house with your own hands and fill it, and no one will ever put you under any stairs again. Harry closed his eyes and held the promise and slept, and on the windowsill in the dark the small white flower he had named Lily turned its 5 pale petals toward the last of the moon. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. What the old magic remembers on the night the book judged him ready. It did not open at once. Harry had turned 8 in the summer, and the summer had gone, and the first of the autumn dark had come down early over Privet Drive, and he had crept to the back of the cupboard as he did every night and laid his palm on the worn triangle, and for the space of several breaths nothing happened at all. The leather stayed cool under his hand. He waited. He had learned to wait. A year of goblins and rings and old bonds had taught him that the great things came in their own time and could not be hurried, and so he knelt in the dark with his hand on the book and did not press it. And at last, slow as a tide, the warmth came, and the gold rose, and the cover lifted, and the voice, when it spoke, was different from any voice it had used with him before. "Tonight I will keep the promise I made you under the stairs a year ago," it said, and there was ceremony in it, a gathering, the sound of a thing long withheld and now to be given. "Tonight I will tell you the whole of the mark. Bring out the ring and set it before you, and call up the little sun, and make the light steady. For this is a telling that wants light, and it is the oldest telling I carry, and I have not told it whole to a living soul in 300 years, and I have never, in all my long keeping, told it to one so young. But you are ready. I have watched you become ready. So light the light, small air, and be still, and listen, and do not flinch from the shape of it, for it is not the tale of the bogey the world has made it. It is a story of what our house is for." Harry drew the ring from its hiding and set it on the open page in the pool of gold, the black stone catching the light, the worn mark upturned. He called the little sun and steadied it above them at the height of a candle, and knelt back on his heels with his hands open on his knees, and grew still, still all through, the deep stillness the book had taught him, the stillness of a held cup that does not spill. And the book began to tell. Long ago, it said, when this island was younger and the forest still came down to the sea, and men had learned magic but had not yet learned to write it down and so still remembered it truly, there was born to our house a generation of 3 brothers. Antioch was the eldest, and he was the strongest, and strength was his hunger. Cadmus was the second, and he was the cleverest, and cleverness was his undoing. And Ignatus was the youngest, and he was the wisest, though no one thought so at the time, for wisdom in the young is always mistaken for something quieter and less impressive, and that is wisdom's oldest disguise and its safest. The gold light held steady, and the little sun turned, and the black stone drank the light and gave a little of it back from its worn heart, and Harry did not move. They were travelers, the 3 brothers. The book went on, its slow, unhurried sentences unrolling now like a road going back into the hills, and their road brought them one evening to a river. It was no ordinary river. It was the great river that lies at the edge of the ordinary world, the river that every soul crosses once and only once and never twice, the boundary between the country of the living and the far gray shore that no living foot may walk and return, and it ran wide and deep and dark and cold under a sky the color of the inside of a shell. And there was no bridge, for there is never a bridge, and the crossing of it is not a thing done with the feet. The brothers came to the near bank at dusk, and the water was too deep to wade and too swift to swim, and they were clever, all 3, cleverest of a clever house, and so they did what our house has always done at the edge of the impossible. They made a bridge of their magic out of nothing by wanting, and they set their feet upon it, and they began to cross the river that no living thing crosses, because they were young and sure of themselves, and did not yet understand that some boundaries are not obstacles to be overcome but truths to be honored. Harry listened, and the cupboard around him seemed to fall away, and he could see it, the wide dark water and the shell-colored sky and the 3 figures on their impossible bridge, and he understood in the deep body understanding that came before the mind that he was being shown something true. And at the middle of the river, said the book, where the water ran deepest and coldest, and the far shore and the near shore were equally far, they were met. The gold light dimmed and cooled and gathered close, and the voice went low. The world has told you, if the world has told you anything, that they were met by death, and it has drawn you a picture of a grinning thing in a black hood with a scythe, a bogey to cow children, and that picture is a lie, and it is the lie our house has spent 1,000 years and more failing to unmake, and I will unmake it for you now once, and you will carry the truth of it as the air must. They were not met by a monster. They were met by the keeper of the far shore, the warden of the last threshold, the oldest and most patient of all the powers that are, older than magic, older than men, old as the first thing that ever lived and therefore the first thing that ever had to end. Picture not a skeleton, Harry. Picture the dusk itself given a shape and a weight. Picture the vast gray patience of the tide that has drawn every ship home since the first ship and will draw home the last. Picture the one who stands at the door of the house at evening with the lamp lit, waiting not to seize but to receive all who come in their own time when the day's road is walked to its end. That is the power the brothers met in the middle of the river. It was not cruel. It has never once been cruel. It is only certain and it is only fair, and to the young and the sure and the unready it can seem, in its certainty and its fairness, more terrible than any cruelty, for cruelty can be fought and fairness cannot. Harry sat very still, and the little sun turned, and something in the cupboard had grown large, larger than the walls, and he did not want it to stop. The keeper was, by the oldest law, cheated, the book said. 3 living souls stood in the middle of its river who had no business standing there, who had crossed by cleverness a boundary meant to be crossed only once and only at the appointed hour, and by every ancient right the keeper might have taken them then and there, for that is the price of walking uninvited into the country of the dead. But the keeper did not take them. Mark that, Harry, the whole of our house hangs upon it. The keeper did not take them. Instead, it did a thing that no one has ever fully understood, our house least of all. It praised them. It told them they were clever, cleverer than any who had come before to have crossed its river living, and it offered each of them a gift. Now hear how each brother answered, for the 3 answers are the 3 roads a soul may take when it stands, as you will one day stand, as every soul stands, at the edge of the last boundary, and the choosing of the road is the whole of what it means to be a Peverell. The gold pulsed once, and the ring's black stone seemed to darken and deepen, and Harry leaned toward the light without knowing he leaned. Antioch the eldest, whose hunger was strength, asked for a weapon, said the book. A wand more powerful than any in existence, a wand that must always win, so that its holder need never again stand at any boundary as anything but a conqueror. And the keeper, grave, for it saw where the road would lead and is bound by its own fairness not to refuse, made him such a wand from a tree that grew on the river bank, the elder, and gave it to him. And Antioch went into the world with a weapon that could not be beaten, and boasted of it, and a wand that cannot be beaten is a wand every man living wants to take. And so Antioch was killed in his sleep, for it within the year, his throat opened by a thief, and the wand passed on and passed on, leaving a red road of murders behind it down the centuries, for that is what a thing built to conquer death does. It multiplies death endlessly because it has refused to understand it. That was the first road. The road of the conqueror, it ends always in more of the very thing it set out to defeat. Harry took that in, turning it over slowly. Cadmus the second, whose cleverness was his wound, asked for something crueler to himself. The book went on, softer now, and there was an ache in the softness that Harry had never heard the book allow itself. He had lost a woman he was to have married. She had died before her hour, or before what he could accept as her hour, and standing in the middle of the river of the dead he could not stop himself. He asked for the power to bring her back. And the keeper, graver still, for this is the saddest of the 3 roads and it saw the whole of it, gave him a stone, a small dark stone, and told him that by turning it thrice in his hand he might call back the form of one who had crossed. And Cadmus went home and turned the stone, and she came. The little sun dimmed, and the ring's black stone lay very dark on the golden page, and Harry looked at it and understood, with a small cold shock, what stone it was. But she came wrong, said the book, gently, so gently, not because the keeper had cheated him, but because it had told him true, and he had not listened. She had crossed the river, and no living hand can uncross a soul, and what came back at the turning of the stone was not the woman but her shape, a shadow of her, present and yet an infinite distance away of the near world and yet not in it, cold where she had been warm, silent where she had been dear, a loss made visible and set at his own table, night after night, unable to stay and unable, while he held the stone, to go. And Cadmus, who had wanted only to lay his loss to rest, had instead made it eternal and given it a chair by his fire. And in the end he could not bear it, and he went to the far shore himself by his own hand to be truly with her. And so the second road, the road of the one who will not let the dead be dead, ends where it must, in the living following the lost across the river before their hour, which is the one true tragedy, the only real defeat there is. Mark it, Harry, the stone is not evil. It is the truest thing in this house, for it tells no lie, it shows exactly what it is asked to show. The pain is not in the stone, but in the asking. That is why you may keep it and never once be tempted to misuse it, if you have understood the second brother, for to understand him is to be freed forever from his road. Harry looked at the ring a long moment and did not touch it, and something in him that had been a child's wish, an ordinary child's wish to have his parents back, to turn some stone and have the loud warm house and the laughing man and the flower-named woman restored to him whole, grew quiet and grew wise, and let itself down gently, and was not killed but was set at last to rest. And he understood that the book had told him the tale of Cadmus not as history but as medicine for him tonight. And he was grateful past speech. And now the third brother, said the book, and the gold came up warm again, and the little sun brightened, and the whole cupboard seemed to lean toward the ending. Ignatus the youngest, the wisest, the one they thought quiet, he alone of the 3 had listened. He had watched the grave patience in the keeper while his brothers heard only its offer, and he had understood, standing in the middle of the river of the dead, the thing his brothers never grasped, that they were not speaking with an enemy. That the power before them was not the thief of life but its faithful other half, the low note under the high, the evening that gives the day its meaning, the shore that makes the crossing a journey and not an endless drifting. And so when his turn came to ask, Ignatus did not ask for mastery over the boundary, nor for the power to break it, nor to cheat it, nor to reach across it and drag the crossed back. He asked courteously, as one asks a great lord in whose house one is a guest, only for the means to go from that place in his own time, unfollowed, unseized, and to leave the world only when he himself was ready and full of years, and had walked his whole road to its proper end. He asked, in short, not to conquer the keeper, but to be allowed to be its friend. The voice had gone very quiet now, and very full, and Harry was leaning so far toward the gold that the light lay full on his upturned face. And the keeper, said the book, who had watched the first two brothers to their ruin, because it saw that ruin in their asking, did a thing over the third that it does perhaps once in an age of the world. It welcomed him. It took from its own shoulders the cloak that hides the far shore from living eyes, the veil that lies between the two countries, a hood of shadow that no eye can pierce and no spell can find, and it gave that cloak to Ignatus freely, as a host gives a gift to a guest he has come to honor, and it named him, there in the river, not victim, not conqueror, but friend. And Ignatus took the cloak and wrapped himself in it and walked back to the near bank across the water, and he lived. He lived long, Harry. He lived a great life, a full life, quiet and unfollowed, sheltered by the keeper's own gift from every danger that comes before its hour, and he grew old, and he had children, and their children had children, and the line ran on, our line, down all the long years to a summer night 8 years ago, in a cupboard under a stair. And when at last Ignatus was old, older than any of his blood before or since, and his road was walked to its true end, and his hour came at its own appointed pace, he did not run from it, and he did not rage against it, and he did not turn a stone to cheat it. He took off the cloak of shadow, he folded it and left it to his son. And he went down to the river alone, an old man full of years, and the keeper was waiting for him with the lamp lit at the door of the house at evening. And Ignatus went to meet the oldest power in the world, not as a beaten thing dragged across against its will, but upright and unflinching and willing, as one goes at last to the house of an old and dear friend. And the keeper received him as an equal and as a friend, and they crossed the river together, and that, Harry, that and nothing else is what it means, in the true telling, in the only telling that matters, to be the master of death. The cupboard was utterly silent, the little sun turned, the ring lay on the golden page. Not one who defeats death, the book said softly into the silence, for none can, and the trying makes monsters, as it made a monster of the man who killed your parents, who has walked all three of the wrong roads at once and become the most ruined soul in the history of our kind. Not one who cheats it, nor one who drags the dead back from it, nor one who conquers it, but one who has understood it and made peace with it and become its friend, and so is free of the one thing that drives all the others, the flinch from the ending, the cold recoil at the root of every cruelty, the recoil that made the dark one dark. That is our inheritance, small heir. That is what the mark means. We are not the masters of death because we can escape it. We are the masters of death because we do not need to. We are the keepers of the boundary, the friends of the evening, the house that does not flinch. And that freedom, that unflinching, is the deepest power there is, deeper than any wand, and it is yours by blood, and it woke in you when you were 4 years old and used it, without knowing, to mend your own small hurt, because a soul that does not flinch from the great ending does not flinch from the small hurts either, and heals them as easily as breathing. The little sun turned, and the ring lay on the page, and Harry, when he could find his voice, asked the question that had risen in him through the whole of the telling. "The three things," he said, "the wand and the stone and the cloak, where are they now? A fair question and an heir's question, and I will answer it, though the answer is a burden as much as a gift," the book said. "The three works were never destroyed, for works of that making do not destroy easily, and they have gone their 3 ways down the centuries, and this is where they are, so far as I can feel them from my long sleep. The wand of Antioch runs loose in the world still, won and re-won by murder and conquest, leaving its red road generation upon generation, and I do not hold its thread, and I do not wish to, and you must never, whatever befalls you, no matter how sweetly it is offered, reach for it, for it is the first road wearing a crown, and it ends where the first road ends. Let it run, it is not ours to catch. The cloak of Ignatus is another matter, for the cloak is ours, truly ours, the one of the 3 that came down our own line unbroken from father to son, hand to hand, down all the years to your father, who wore it, and kept it close, and used it in the last of his days to shield those he guarded. It did not burn with him. On the very week your parents crossed the river, A wise old man, the same gray wizard whose instruments watch this house, came quietly and asked the cloak of your father's estate. To study, he said, and he has it yet folded in a drawer in a high tower, and he does not fully understand what he holds, and he means, I think, in his long calculating way to give it back to you one day on his own terms at a moment of his own choosing. It will come to you, be patient. It is yours, and a thing that is truly yours finds its way home in the end. And the stone, the gold dimmed and gathered close about the ring, and the black stone lay very still and very dark on the golden page. The stone of Cadmus, the saddest of the three, the truest of the three, is the stone you hold. It was kept when the wizarding world had forgotten it, by the one keeper careful enough to keep such a thing safely. The goblins in the deepest vault of the bank, set into the signet of our house, guarded 1,000 years against the day an heir would wake who had understood the second brother well enough to be trusted with it. That is why Nagnok could give it to you and go home easy. You will never turn it. You learned tonight in the tale of Cadmus the one lesson that makes a soul safe to hold it, that the dead are not to be dragged back but honored and left in peace and met in time at the river as friends. Wear it in the dark to know it is real, never turn it thrice. And you will be of all the souls who have ever held the three works, the first in 1,000 years fit to be called their master, because you are the first who wants to use not one of them. Harry sat in the gold light with the whole of it settling into him, vast and quiet, and the thing that filled him then was too large for the cupboard and too large for his body, and almost too large for his young soul to bear, and it was none of the small nameable things. It was too great to be any one of them. It was all pure, immense, clean, the answer of a small living thing that has been shown, gently, the shape of the whole, and has not been crushed by it but lifted, and he knelt on the swept floor with tears standing in his eyes that he did not wipe away because they were the right tears the telling deserved, and he let them come. It doesn't put any cold in me, he said at last, wondering, testing the truth of it in his own mouth and finding it true. The river, the keeper. When I think about it now after that, there's no cold in me at all. I thought there would be. There's a cold everyone carries about it. I've watched it in them, in their faces when it comes up. I haven't got it, not anymore. No, said the book, and there was a fullness in it past its usual reserve, the fullness of a very old thing that has waited a very long time to give a very great gift and has given it well. You have not and you never will, not the way the world carries it, and that will make you in time when the world tries to cow you with the one weapon it truly has, unbreakable. They will not understand why. They will call you brave, and it is not bravery, for bravery is going on with the cold in you, and the cold will simply not be in you. They will call you cold yourself, and it is not coldness, for you feel everything, you feel more than any of them. It is only that you have met the shape of the whole at 8 years old in a cupboard and made your peace with it. That is the rarest thing in the world, Harry. Guard it as you guard your name. There was one more thing he had to ask, and he asked it quietly, looking at the ring and not at the gold. My mum and dad, he said, they crossed it, the river, when I was 1. He was careful with the words, laying them down one at a time as the book laid down its own. Are they all right over there on the far side? The gold gathered close and warm, and the voice, when it came, had none of the grand roll of the telling in it. It was small and near and only for him. They walked their road to its end sooner than any road should end, and that is a wrong, and I will not pretend it is not, it said. But hear the rest and keep it, for it is as true as everything else I have told you tonight. The far shore is not a cold place, whatever men have always said of it. It is only the other half of the one thing. The keeper does not punish the crossed, it receives them and keeps them, and they are at peace there at rest, done with all hurt, the way a traveler is at rest at the end of the road with the fire lit and the door shut against the weather. Your mother and father are not lost, Harry. They are not wandering or cold or calling for you across the dark. They are home before you in the house at the end of the road, and one day, long from now, when your own road is walked full and long and good, you will go to that same door and it will open, and they will be the ones who open it. That is not a thing to shrink from. That is a thing to grow slowly toward across a whole long life first. But when you think of them so, not gone, ahead. Harry sat with that a long while, and the little son turned, and he found the words had gone into the same deep place where the tale of Cadmus had gone, and settled there, and quieted something in him that had ached without a name since before he could remember. Ahead, he said, trying it, and found he could hold it, and did. And to prove to himself that it was true, that the telling had changed him, Harry did a thing he had never dared. He reached down into the deep water of himself, past the little sun, past the mending warmth, past the guard, down to the very bottom where the oldest thing lay, the thing that had woken when he was 4, and he did not pull anything up. He only laid his attention on it, gently, the way you lay a hand on the flank of a sleeping animal to feel it breathe, and he felt it there, immense and patient and his, the whole weight of the line behind him, Ignatus and all the fathers after him, down all the long years, a river of blood and keeping running from the shell-colored sky to the cupboard under the stairs, and it was not a burden. It held him up. He was the near bank of a very long river, and the river was on his side. The little sun above him, without his asking, grew. It did not blaze, it did not flare wild. It grew slowly, steadily, doubling and doubling in the calm way that great things grow, until it hung the size of a lantern, the size of a harvest moon brought indoors, filling the whole cupboard with a gold so deep and warm and living that the dust motes in it turned like small planets, and the spider in her corner drew all her legs beneath her in what might have been reverence, and it threw no heat that could burn and cast no shadow that could frighten, and it was the most beautiful thing Harry had ever made. And he had made it not by wanting harder but by fearing less, and he understood the difference at 8 years old and knew he would never unlearn it. There the book whispered, "There is your inheritance, awake at last. Now let it down gently and keep it small by day, for the world is not ready to see a light like that in a child's cupped hands, and there are those beginning even now to look this way who must not find you before you are grown. Let it down, Harry. You have done enough tonight to satisfy 1,000 years of your fathers. Let it down and rest." And Harry let the great light down slowly, lovingly, until it was again the little sun, the conqueror of gold, turning above his palm, and he lay down with the ring back in the book's keeping and the whole vast quiet inheritance settling into its place in him like water finding its level, and he slept and did not dream of the warm place he could not reach, for he no longer needed it. He had a warmer place now, and it was inside him, and no one could put a lock on it. Far to the east, across the sea, in a forest so old and so dark that the local people had not walked into its heart in living memory, a thing that was not alive and would not die felt the great light grow. It had been a man once, it was not a man now. It was less than a ghost and more than a memory, a shred of a soul torn loose from its body on a night 8 years gone, when a curse meant to end a child's life had turned in the air and come home to its caster and unmade him, or nearly all but a splinter, and that splinter had fled, screaming without a mouth, across the sea to the darkest place it could find, and there it had clung, bodiless, patient, waiting, feeding on the small lives of the forest. On snakes and rats and the slow beetles under the bark, hoarding what little strength such feeding gave, and wanting with the one appetite it had left, which was to want and to unmake, and remembering with the one memory it had kept, which was of a child in a cot who should have died and had not. For 8 years the shred had felt nothing from that child but silence. It had assumed the child ordinary, a fluke, a lucky nothing wrapped in a mother's dying accident, and it had turned its bodiless attention to other things, to the slow work of clawing back toward a body, toward a return, toward the day it would be whole again and the world would learn again to speak its name in whispers. Tonight the silence broke. Across 1,000 miles of dark, the shred felt the great gold light grow in a cupboard under a stair, felt the old magic of the oldest house wake to its full height in the body of the very child the shred had come to kill. And it went, if a thing so ruined can be said to feel anything so alive, cold as the pit and ravenous as a flame at once. For it knew that light, knew it in the marrow it no longer had, for it had felt the edge of that same magic once before, for the space of a single heartbeat. On the night it lost its body, and it had spent 8 years telling itself that heartbeat had been the mother's dying and nothing more. It had not been the mother's dying, it had been this, it had been the child. The child was not a fluke. The child was a Peverell, awake and growing, and the shred understood in the cold clear ruin of its cunning 3 things at once. That the child carried a power that could remake a broken soul or end one forever, that the child was still small and unfinished and reachable, and that whoever came to the child first in the years before the power finished its growing would hold the whole of the future in his hand. The shred could not cross the sea, not yet, not bodiless, not weak, not alone. But it was not entirely alone, even now. There were those still living who had served it, who wore its mark burned into their arms and waited, in comfortable houses, for a sign that their master was not gone. And there were those not of its old service, who collected old and powerful things the way lesser men collect stamps, who would pay any price and dare any darkness to lay their hands on a relic of the house of Peverell, and who had only ever failed to find such a relic because until 8 years ago there had been none awake to find. There was one awake now, and it burned like a beacon in the dark. One of the watchers of that beacon kept no forest and wore no burned mark. He kept a shop. It stood in a fold of a crooked alley that the ordinary maps of London did not show. A narrow black-fronted shop with no name over the door and one small window, and in the window on a stand of dark velvet there sat always a single object, changed each week, each one older and stranger and dearer than the last, and those who knew the trade knew that the object in the window was never the best thing the shop had to sell, but only the bait, and that the true stock lay below. In cellars that went down further than any cellar in London had a right to go. The man who kept the shop was named Ambrose Vane, and he was very old and very rich and very patient, and he had spent the better part of a long life gathering to himself the oldest and most potent objects the magical world had made and lost, not to use them, for he had little talent and less interest in using, but to have them, to hold them, to be the one hand in which the great lost things of the world at last came to rest. He was not cruel for pleasure. He was worse than cruel, he was indifferent, and indifference, patient and well-funded, has done more harm in the world than all the tempers of all the hot-blooded villains who ever lived. For 30 years Ambrose Vane had wanted one thing above every other thing in his cellars, and had never been able to buy it or steal it or find it because it did not exist to be found. He had wanted a relic of the House of Peverell, the oldest house, the deepest name, the sign of the three works. He had chased the rumor of it down every alley in Europe and into the vaults of two dead lords and the ashes of a burned abbey, and had come away every time with nothing, because the relics of that house were either lost past finding or guarded past reaching, or as the wiser dealers told him with a shrug, simply gone, the line spent, the account closed, the whole matter as dead as the Peverells themselves. On the morning after the night the great light grew, one of Ambrose Vane's instruments woke him. It was a small thing of blackened silver and bone that hung on a chain in the deepest of his cellars, an old detector, older than the shop, tuned across a lifetime to the single frequency of Peverell make, and it had hung silent and cold for the 30 years he had owned it, and he had kept it more from stubbornness than from any real belief it would ever stir. It stirred now. He came down to it in his dressing gown, an old man with a candle, and he stood before the blackened silver thing and watched it turn on its chain, slowly, deliberately, its bone needle swinging round and then steadying at last and pointing, faint but unmistakable, west and a little south, out past the wall of the cellar, out past the crooked alley, out past London, toward the flat grey commuter counties where nothing interesting had ever happened or ever would. Ambrose Vane looked at the needle a long time in the candlelight. Then he smiled, which was not a thing his face did often, and it did not improve his face. So, he said to the empty cellar, to the turning needle, to the 30 patient years, you were only sleeping. He did not go west that morning. He was far too old and far too patient a hunter to go blundering after a signal he did not understand. He would learn first. He would find out what had woken, and where exactly, and how strong, and how guarded, and whether it was a loose relic to be quietly acquired or something larger and more complicated that would want handling with more art. He had agents for the learning. He had money for the money, and favors for the favors, and time, above all time, the hunter's truest weapon. He put out his candle and went back up to his shop, and began, that very day, to send out quiet, careful, well-paid questions into the world, aimed west and a little south, toward a town he had never heard of, toward a house he did not yet know, toward the beacon that had burned one night and gone dark again, and that he meant, in his patient, indifferent way, to find and open and add to his cellars. The shred gathered itself in the heart of the old forest and turned the whole of its ruined attention west, toward a small island, toward a small town, toward a small house, toward a cupboard under a stair where a great gold light had just grown and just gently been let down again, and it began patiently in the way of things that have nothing but time to reach. In the cupboard Harry slept. And the book which had been full, so full, 1,000 years of held back giving poured out all in a single night, felt the reaching before it was anywhere near, felt it as a change in the far weather, a chill on a wind that had not yet arrived, and the gold along its pages, which had been banked warm for the sleeping child, went slowly cool and cooled and grew watchful, and the little sun above Harry's face dimmed of its own accord to the barest coal, hiding its light, and along the threshold of number 4. Privet Drive, the old guarding magic that had turned a cruel man's hand a hand's width from a child's shoulder, stirred, and thickened and set itself quietly facing east, toward a thing that had that very night, 1,000 miles away, begun to turn its cold attention toward the last of the house it had once come to end. All through that night the defenses of the oldest house, so long asleep, came one by one to their posts. The threshold of number 4 set its face to the dark and hardened, patient as a seawall before a storm still a week out at sea. In its hidden corner the signet ring lay cool and watchful against the book's spine, the black stone that had looked upon the far shore turning its ancient attention outward now, a sentinel that did not sleep. And in Harry's palm, though he did not wake to feel it, the coin from the goblins warmed and cooled and warmed again, a slow pulse like a watchman's tread, carrying the first faint word of the far weather down through the deep places to a black stone chamber under a distant city, where an old archivist, walking the sleeping shelves by lamplight, felt the great ledger of the House of Peverell stir under his hand for the second time in 3 years, and read the fresh line and did not smile. And went at once to wake his master. None of it was loud, that was the way of the old magic, it did not perform, it kept. But the whole of it, the threshold and the ring and the coin and the book and the goblins in their deep chamber, turned together that night, some slow and enormous engine long dormant grinding at last into motion, all of it facing one way, all of it set to the single task for which the House of Peverell had been raised out of the first dawn of the world. The first touch of the shadow was still far off, but it had begun, the book felt it begin. And over the sleeping face of the child it had waited 1,000 years to find. The ancient magic of the House of Peverell woke fully at last to its true and terrible work, which was not teaching and was not mending, and was not the making of small gold suns to warm a lonely child, but was the one thing it had been forged in the first dawn of the world to do, and had done down all the ages for every soul of its line, and would do now for this one whatever came. It began to stand guard. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. Wary eyes. It took Ambrose Vane the better part of a year to narrow the world down to a single street. He did it as he did everything, without haste and without mercy, spending money the way a patient gardener spends water, a little here, a little there, never enough to drown the thing he was growing, always enough to keep it alive. He set his agents to the slow work. A forgotten clerk in a ministry basement, paid in a rare book he could never have afforded on his salary, went quietly through the birth registers of magical children born in the West End a little south of England. In the year the detector said the beacon was born, and found, among the ordinary names, one that made him sit up straight in his chair: Potter. A witch who read the racing pages and a great deal else besides, paid in gold and in a promise, spent 3 months in the pubs of the county with her ears open, and came back with a name of a town, Little Winging, and a name of a street, and the fact offered as a curiosity that the Potter child was being raised not among his own kind at all, but by Muggle relations who never spoke of him. That last fact was the one that made Ambrose Vane put down his teacup and go very still in the way that his few surviving business rivals had learned to be wary of. A magical child of the oldest house, raised among Muggles, unknown, unclaimed, unwatched by the ministry, with no wizarding family to raise an alarm if he vanished. It was, from the point of view of a patient collector, very nearly perfect. It was the kind of gap in the world that only opened once in a career, and Ambrose Vane had spent his whole long career waiting at the edges of such gaps for one to open wide enough to step through. He did not step through at once. He was too old a hand for that. He sent first one careful man to look. The man's name was Grill, and he was thin and gray and forgettable, which was his profession as much as his nature, for Grill was a finder of things and a watcher of houses, a wizard of small and specialized talents, none of them showy, all of them exact. He could walk down a street and read the wards on every house upon it as a plumber reads pipes. He could stand at a bus stop for 6 hours and be remembered by no one. He could tell from the taste of the air over a doorstep what manner of magic slept behind it. Ambrose Vane paid him a great deal and told him to go to Little Winging and to find number 4 Privet Drive and to look at it, only to look and to touch nothing, and to come back and say what he had seen. Grill went, and Grill, who had read the wards on 10,000 houses and had never once been read in return, got the surprise of his careful gray life. Harry felt him coming before he saw him. He was 9 now, and the year since the great telling had changed him in ways that did not show to a careless eye and shouted to a careful one. He had grown, not tall, he would never be tall, but solid-rooted, present in a way that made grown adults glance at him twice on the street and then look away, unable to say what had snagged their attention. He walked with his head up. He met eyes. And the sight the book had given him, the reading of the true thing under the shown thing, had deepened over the year into something the book did not have a plain name for and called, when Harry pressed it, the watchfulness of the house, the old instinct of a hunted lion that had survived 1,000 years by feeling the hunter before the hunter felt them. So when a thin gray man got off the bus at the end of Privet Drive on a bright cold Saturday in the spring and began to walk slowly up the pavement, reading the houses, Harry, weeding the front bed of number 4 as he had been set to do, felt it happen the way you feel a draft from a door opened in another room. A wrongness in the street, an attention that did not belong. He did not lift his head. He had learned better than that a long time ago. He kept his hands in the cold earth and his eyes on the weeds, and he let the wrongness come up the pavement toward him, and he read it as it came. The gray man was looking at the houses, not as a man looks who is lost, or a man looks who is visiting, as a man looks who is counting, weighing, pricing. And when he came level with number 4 he slowed, only a little, only for a step, and Harry felt the man's attention swing across the house and over the front garden and pass, light as a spider's foot, across the back of Harry's own bent neck, and pause there, and Harry understood in that pause that he had been found. He did the hardest thing, which was nothing. He kept weeding. He did not stiffen, did not turn, did not give the gray man the smallest sign that a 9-year-old in a flower-bed had felt an expert's practiced attention brush across him and known it for exactly what it was. He let the man look. He counted weeds, one and then the next, and under the counting he reached down into the deep water of himself quietly, without a ripple showing on the surface, and he laid the not seeing over the whole of the front garden, over himself, over the house, over the hidden corner of the cupboard where the book slept, thickening it, deepening it, until the wrongness of the gray man's attention slid across it all and found nothing to catch on, nothing to price. Only an ordinary dull house and an ordinary dull child doing an ordinary dull chore in an ordinary dull street where nothing had ever happened or ever would. Grill stood on the pavement a moment longer. He had felt something. He was certain he had felt something, a great slow depth of magic under this house, the very thing his master had sent him to find. And then, even as he reached for it, it had gone thin and gray and ordinary under his reading, slipped out from under his attention like a fish out of a slack net, and left him standing on a suburban pavement looking at a pebble-dashed house with a scrubby garden and a small dark child pulling weeds. And nothing else, nothing at all, and Grill was too good at his work not to know that this was itself the most alarming thing he had encountered in 30 years. Because a house with nothing to find does not first show you something and then hide it. Only a house that is guarded does that, and a house is only guarded by something that knew he was coming. Grill did not linger. Lingering was how careful men stopped being careful. He walked on to the end of the road and turned and walked back down the other side without slowing at all, and got on the next bus and went back to London and told Ambrose Vane the truth, which was the one thing Ambrose Vane always paid extra for. "It's there," Grill said, "in the black-fronted shop, with the single object gleaming on its velvet in the window. Old magic deep, more than I've felt in one place in my life. But it's guarded and the guard is awake and it felt me coming, and it hid the whole house from me while I stood there reading it. I've never had that happen, not once. Whatever's in that house knows how to hide and knows when it's being looked for, and I'd lay my fee it knew I was ministry trained the moment I stepped off the bus." He paused and did a thing Grill did not often do, which was to add an opinion to a report. "If you want my counsel, sir, which you're not paying for, leave it. A thing that guarded doesn't want finding, and things that don't want finding tend to be able to make finders regret it." Ambrose Vane thanked him and paid him and did not take his counsel because Ambrose Vane had waited 30 years, and a warning that a thing was well guarded was, to a collector of his particular patience, not a reason to stop but a confirmation that the thing was worth the taking. A guard meant a treasure. An awake guard meant a great treasure. He sat that evening in the deepest of his cellars before the blackened silver detector that now pointed steady and sure west end a little south, and he began, without haste and without mercy, to plan how a patient man takes a well-guarded thing from a child. He would need help, and he chose it carefully, for the wrong help was worse than none. He hired two, and only two, for a crowd is loud and a crowd talks. The first was a curse-breaker gone sour, a woman who had left the bank's own service under a cloud years back and now sold to the highest bidder the one talent Gringotts had spent a decade teaching her, which was the unpicking of protections that other people believed unpickable. If there was a ward around the house at Privet Drive, she could find its seam, and given time she could open it. The second was a duelist, a cold, flat-eyed man who had killed for causes, and then, when the causes ran out, gone on killing for fees, and who asked no questions beyond the amount, and whose single virtue, from Vane's point of view, was that he did exactly and only what he was paid to do, and stopped the instant the fee was spent. Vane did not want the duelist to kill. He wanted, if it could be managed, the child alive, for a relic that generates its own guard is a thing of interest, but a living source of such magic is a thing beyond price, and Ambrose Vane had not built his cellars by settling for the lesser of two treasures. But he hired a killer all the same, because a patient man plans for the day his patience is not returned. Through the spring he spent his finders like coins, sending them one after another up Privet Drive, not to break the guard but to map it, to chart the exact shape and reach and rhythm of the thing that turned them, so that when at last he came in person he would come not as a man walking blind into an unknown ward, but as a surgeon who has studied the body and knows precisely where to cut. He learned that the concealment was strongest by day and thinnest in the small hours. He learned from the pattern of the turnings that it was anchored not to the house but to the child, and moved when the child moved, which told him something he found very interesting indeed about what he was hunting. And he learned from the one finder who came back white and would not go again, that the guard was growing, week by week, stronger and quicker and more aware, which meant that whatever window he had would close, and that if he meant to take this thing he must take it soon, before the child finished becoming whatever the child was becoming. He was not the only one making plans. Far to the north, in the circular office at the top of the high tower, Albus Dumbledore had spent that same year growing steadily less easy in his mind, and on the very night Grill rode the bus back to London, one of his instruments told him why. He had known for a year that something at Privet Drive was teaching the child a magic Dumbledore could not identify and had not sanctioned, and he had chosen, after long thought, to watch and not to act, because the ward held and the child seemed safe and the thread, whatever it was, might yet prove useful to the plan. He had held to that choice through the autumn and the winter, tuning his instrument finer, reading Arabella's letters, telling himself that patience was wisdom. But tonight the fine silver instrument had sung a second note over the first, a note Dumbledore knew far too well, the note of a stranger's magic moving near the wards, testing them, reading them, and it was not the deep, slow old magic he had grown used to hearing from the house. It was a sharp, cold, professional magic, the magic of a hunter, and it had come up Privet Drive that afternoon and stood outside number 4 and reached for the child, and had been turned away by something Dumbledore had not put there and did not command. That was the thing that changed his reckoning, not that the child was growing strange, strangeness Dumbledore could manage, given time. but that others had begun to feel the child too, and to come for him, and that the child was being defended against those others by a power older and deeper than the blood-ward Dumbledore had staked everything upon, a power that answered to Harry and to whatever taught him and not in any degree to Albus Dumbledore. He sat a long while with his crooked fingers steepled before his long nose, and he reasoned it out, coldly and kindly together, as he did everything. He could go himself at last and end the mystery and demand of the child and of whatever taught him an accounting. But to do so was to reveal that he had watched and not acted for a year while a stranger's magic circled the house, and worse, to risk a confrontation with a power he did not understand, in a place where his own carefully laid protections were plainly no longer the strongest thing present, and Dumbledore had learned, at the greatest cost of his long life, never to force a confrontation on ground he did not command. Or he could send someone he trusted to watch more closely, and strengthen what wards he could reach without alerting either the child or the hunter, and continue, a little longer, to gather understanding before he spent his hand. It was the same choice he had made a year ago, and he made it the same way, and he was old enough and honest enough to feel, again, the cold draft under the reasoning. That every month he waited, the child grew further out of his reach, and the power that guarded the child grew stronger, and the day approached, faster than Dumbledore liked, when Harry Potter would be beyond managing altogether, and would have to be met not as a piece in a game but as a person, and dealt with honestly, which was the one thing Dumbledore's long game had never quite made room for. He sent Arabella a note. He sent, more quietly, a second watcher, a young order member with a talent for going unseen, to take a room in Little Winging for the spring and keep an eye on both the house and any strangers who came sniffing at it. And he did not sleep and watched the moon, and told himself, as he had told himself for a year, that he was being wise. In the cupboard under the stairs that same night, the book was neither reasoning nor watching the moon. It was preparing Harry for a fight. "You felt the gray man today," it said, the moment Harry's palm touched the triangle. It did not ask. "You hit us well, better than well. He went away with nothing, and that is a victory, and I want you to hold it as a victory before I tell you the rest, which is harder. Will you hold the victory first?" "I'll hold it," Harry said. He was cross-legged on the swept floor, the little sun steady above him, the ring on the page. "But I know there's a rest. I felt it too. He wasn't the last. He was the first one they sent to look." "Yes," said the book, and there was no gentling in it now, only the flat, clean truth it always gave him, which he had come to prize above any comfort. "He was a finder, sent by someone patient and rich and cold, one of those I warned you of the night the goblin came, the kind who meets a marvel and wants to own it. He has found us. He will report that we are here and that we are guarded, and a certain sort of hunter hears guarded and comes running, not away, but toward. So they will come again, and the next one will not come to look. Which means, small air, that the years of only learning are over, and the years of learning to defend have begun tonight, and I am sorry to take the last of your quiet from you a little sooner than I would have wished, but the world does not ask us when it is ready. It only comes, and we meet it, or we do not." Harry took that in. He turned the ring on the page a slow quarter turn, looking at the black stone, and when he looked up his face had a settledness to it that no 9-year-old's face should have been able to hold. "Teach me to defend it, then," he said. "The house, the book, me, all of it. Teach me the guarding kind, the keeping kind, not the breaking kind." A pause. Yet something moved in the gold that was almost laughter and almost a swell of some deeper thing, and was in the end only the deep warm attention of a very old thing looking at a very good pupil. Spoken like the air of the house, it said, "Then attend, and we begin. I will not teach you to throw fire, though you will be able to in time, and the throwing of fire is easy and the not throwing of it is hard, and I mean to teach you the hard thing first. I will teach you the shield. Not the small guard that turned your uncle's hand, which your body makes without your asking. A shield you raise on purpose, hold on purpose, shape on purpose, that will stand between you and a curse the way the threshold stands between you and a cruel hand, a wall of your own will and your own blood that nothing the hunters carry can cross without your leave. It is the oldest of our defenses and the deepest, and it is worthy of you, and it will take you months to learn it whole, and we have, I think, months, but not many, so let us not waste this one. Put out your hands, so. Now feel for the guard, the little cold wall, the one that lives at the edge of your skin. Find it. Do you have it?" "I have it," Harry said, and between his open hands the air had gone faintly cold and faintly hard, a curved shimmer no wider than a dinner plate. "Now grow it," said the book, not with force, with certainty. "It is already strong, you have only to believe it larger, and it will be larger, for a shield is nothing but a certainty made solid. You are safe behind it, you have always been safe behind it. Grow the safety." And Harry, in the light of the little sun, on the swept floor of the cupboard under the stairs, began, at 9 years old, to learn to make a wall that a grown dark wizard could not cross. They worked at it every night through the spring, and the shield grew. By the 3rd week Harry could hold a curved wall the size of a door for the length of a slow count of 10, and the little son could push against it from the outside without breaking through. By the sixth week he could hold it without counting, could talk while he held it, could hold it and mend the cup at the same time, which the book said was the true test. For a shield you can only hold by giving it your whole mind is a shield that fails the moment the fight gives your mind something else to do. By the end of the spring he could raise it in the space of a single breath, snap it up between himself and a thrown thing before the thing arrived, and the book, which did not flatter, told him plainly that he was faster at it than wizards 3 times his age who had wands to help them, because he had no wand to lean on and so had learned to lean on the only thing that never failed, which was himself. The night it truly came whole he did not see coming, which was the point. He had grown easy in the practice, holding the shield while he talked, and he was talking, telling the book about a kestrel he had watched hang over the playing field that afternoon, when the little sun, at the book's silent word, folded itself into a hard bright dart and shot straight at his face out of the dark, fast, with no warning at all. Harry did not think. There was no time to think, which was the lesson. The shield was simply there, snapped up full and curved and humming in the space of no time at all, and the dart of light struck it and splashed against it in a spray of gold and was turned harmlessly up into the low ceiling, where it broke apart into a scatter of sparks and drifted down and went out, and Harry sat blinking in the dark with his heart going and the shield still ringing in the air before him, raised by no decision he could remember making. There, said the book, very quiet, that is the shield that will keep you, not the one you raise when you have time to be clever. The one that is already up before your cleverness arrives, because it lives in you now below thought, where the guard lives, where the mending lives, where the light lives. You have made it part of yourself. It will not leave you because it does not wait for you to summon it any more than your own skin waits, and it will hold when you are surprised, or tired, or hurt, or cornered. Do you understand what you have done tonight, Harry? I stopped it without meaning to, Harry said slowly. You stopped it because meaning to had become unnecessary, said the book. That is mastery, child, not the doing of a hard thing with great effort, the doing of a hard thing without any effort at all, because it has stopped being separate from you. You are 9 years old and you have a shield that lives in your blood, and I tell you plainly, as I have told you no lie in all our years, that there are grown wizards feared across this country who cannot do what you did just now, tired in the dark mid-sentence about a bird. Sleep, you have earned it, and know when you lie down that whatever comes up that road for you, it will not find a cornered child. It will find a wall it did not expect, and behind the wall the last of the oldest house awake. And all the while the net drew tighter around Privet Drive, and Harry, with his watchfulness deepening by the week, felt every strand of it draw. He felt the young order watcher take the room above the newsagent's and knew him at once for what he was, a wizard trying to pass for a muggle and not quite managing the shoes, and he watched the watcher watch the house and did nothing and let himself be watched, because a watcher who thinks he has not been noticed is worth more than one who has. He felt Mrs. Figg's attention sharpen, felt the letters she wrote, and once, passing her gate, he stopped and looked at her with the sight and saw the whole of her, the squib who had watched over him for years and never been allowed to help, and he said gently, "Thank you for keeping an eye out, Mrs. Figg. I know you have. It's all right." "I'm all right," and walked on and left her sitting down hard in her doorway with her hand pressed to her mouth, and that night her letter to Dumbledore was 3 pages long and shook a little at the edges. One of the hunters tried Harry directly once and learned better. It was at the little library on the High Street where Harry went most Saturdays and where he had at last, at 9, been allowed a card of his own, and he was at the low shelf in the corner with a book about the sea when a man sat down at the reading table nearby, an ordinary-looking man in an ordinary raincoat, and began in the ordinary way of a friendly adult to talk to him. Did he like the sea? Was that a good book? Did he live near here then? Went to school near here, did he? What was his name? Harry, who had felt the man for what he was the moment he came through the door, the wrongness coming off him like cold off a freezer, gave him a 9-year-old exactly. He gave him mumbles and shrugs and a runny sniff. He gave him a boy who could not quite meet a grown-up's eye and answered every question a half-beat slow and a quarter wrong, who said his name was Kevin, who said he lived over past the Tesco, who said school was all right he supposed, who was in every particular the man's practiced attention could reach for, so ordinary, so dull, so exactly the nothing a hunter expects to find and therefore is satisfied to find, that the man's cold reading slid over him and came up empty again. The same emptiness Grill had met on the pavement, the emptiness that a truly guarded thing wears like a coat, but Harry did more than hide that day, because he had grown past merely hiding. While the man questioned him, Harry, under the mumbles, quietly read the man back. He let his own attention rest, light as a spider's foot, on the true thing under the raincoat, and he took the man's measure as thoroughly as the man believed he was taking Harry's, and he learned 3 things worth more than the man ever learned about him. That the man was paid, not commanded, which meant he could be outweighted, for the paid go home when the money stops. That the man carried something in his left coat pocket that hummed against Harry's sight, some instrument for the confirming of magical children, which had stayed cold and silent the whole while, because Harry had not let it feel a thing, and that the man under the flat, friendly patience had no stomach for this job, for this street, for the report he would have to make, and did not fully believe there was anything here at all, and wanted, more than he wanted his fee, to be told to stop. So Harry, being 9 and merciful and clever, gave him what he wanted. He let his runny-nosed dull Kevin say, in a bored small voice, that his mum said not to talk to strange men and he had to go now, and he gathered up his book about the sea and shuffled off to the desk to have it stamped, and did not look back, and the man in the raincoat sat a while longer at the reading table and then got up and left, and reported to the woman who paid him that he had spent an afternoon in a dead-end suburb and found nothing but a sniveling child called Kevin, and that if there was anything in Little Winging worth the finding, he for one could not find it, and he would not be going back. That was one hunter turned with nothing but a wet sniff and a false name, and Harry, walking home in the spring rain with his sea book under his jumper to keep it dry, understood that this too was the guarding kind of magic, the keeping kind, the winning of a battle by making sure it never became won. And he felt twice more that spring, the cold professional attention come up the road and reach for the house and slide off the not seeing and go away baffled. And each time it was a different finder, and each time it came a little closer before it was turned. And Harry understood without being told that Ambrose Vane was mapping the guard, learning its edges, bending finder after finder to chart exactly how the defense worked so that when at last he sent something that was not a finder, it would know where to push. The goblins felt the mapping too. A week before the solstice, the coin woke against Harry's hip in the middle of a maths lesson, warm and then hot, and when he got it alone at last that night and laid it on the open page, the book read out of it a message longer than any the coin had carried before, Nagnak's own hand, terse and exact. The bank has kept its watch, the book translated, and the watch has borne fruit, and the fruit is bitter. A collector moves against you. We know the man, his name is a stain in our own ledgers, for he has bought from us and cheated us, and we do not forget a cheat. He has hired a curse-breaker who was once ours and is ours no longer, and a killer whose fee we have traced, and he means to come to your house in person, and soon when your concealment thins, which our reckoning says will be the shortest night. Hear the hard part, heir of the old house. We cannot reach you before he does. The oldest law binds us as it binds all. We may not cross uninvited into the dwelling of muggles, and the wards the grey wizard laid make our own swift roads run slow at your door, and by the time we have leave and way to come to you, the night will be decided. We are coming, we will not be in time for the first of it. You and your book will meet the first of it alone. Hold, and we will be the second of it, and the collector will learn what it costs to lay a hand on a friend of the bank. Warm the coin when it begins, and we will run. Harry read it twice and set the coin down and was quiet a moment, and then he did the sum that mattered, the tactical sum, cold and clear as the book had taught him to do it. So we hold the first part ourselves, he said, you and me, long enough for them to come. That's the whole of it. We don't have to win, we have to last. That is the whole of it, said the book, and there was iron in the gold. And it is a great deal easier to last than to win, and you were built to last, small heir, your whole line was. We are the house that endures, that is the one thing we have always done better than anyone, we endure. So we will not try to be clever past our strength on the night. We will raise the shield and hold the threshold and keep and endure, and let the deep magic do what the deep magic has done for 1,000 years, until the deep places send up their friends. Now sleep while you can. There are 7 nights left, and I mean to spend every one of them making you ready, and the first thing you will learn tomorrow is how to hold the shield not for 10 counts, and not for 100, but for as long as it takes, which is the only measure that will matter. So they spent the 7 nights, and Harry learned the last hard thing, which was endurance. The book stopped testing his speed, for his speed was already past teaching, and began instead to test his stamina, keeping him at the shield hour upon hour through the whole long middle of the night, while it pressed against him with the little sun made into a steady weight, a patient unremitting push that never let up and never grew, so that Harry learned in his body the difference between the sprint and the siege, and learned that a wall does not fall to the hardest blow but to the 100th ordinary one. When the one behind it has stopped believing in the wall, he learned not to spend himself in bursts. He learned to breathe under the weight, to let the shield rest on the deep water of himself rather than on the thin, quick surface of his attention, so that holding it cost him no more than standing costs a person who has learned to stand. By the 6th night he could hold it from the settling of the house to the first gray of the dawn without a tremor, and speak and drink and think of other things, and hold it still. I could hold this all night, he said, on the last of the 7, with the shield humming easy in the dark and no strain in his voice at all. That, said the book, is precisely the thing they will not be expecting, and precisely the thing that will beat them. For the ones who come are sprinters, every one trained to break a defense fast and move on, and they have never in their lives met a 9-year-old who can simply outlast them. Hold all night if the night asks it. The goblins will come before the night is out. You have only to still be standing when they do, and you will be. The push came on the shortest night of the year. Harry knew it was coming as he knew everything now before it arrived. All that day the coin had lain warm against him, and warmer, a slow, steady heat with an edge of warning in it that the book, when he asked, read as the goblin's own alarm, felt in the deep places and sent up to him, Something is moving toward you, be ready. All that day the not seeing had felt thin to him, worn, as though it had been probed too often at the same spot and had begun to give. And all that day the young order watcher above the newsagents had been joined, Harry saw, by second and a third, quiet figures come up from London on Dumbledore's word, taking positions around the neighborhood so that the house at number 4 was watched now from 2 directions at once, by those who meant to guard it and by those who meant to take it, and neither of them, Harry thought, weeding the front bed one last time in the long blue dusk, knowing himself the eye of a storm that had not yet broken. Neither of them had the faintest idea that the child in the flower bed had been ready for months. Night came down, the Dursleys slept, the house went still. Harry did not sleep and did not pretend to. He made his small preparations with the calm the book had drilled into him over 7 nights, and he found doing them that his hands were steady. He filled the mended cup and drank it and filled it again and set it by, because a fight makes a body thirsty and a thirsty body is a slow one. He took the ring from the book's keeping and for the first time slid it onto his own thumb where it was far too large and yet at the touch snugged itself somehow to fit, the black stone warm and watchful against his skin, and he did not turn it and would not, but he wanted it near him tonight, wanted the whole of the house with him for what was coming. He banked the little sun to a coal in his cupped hand. And then he did the thing that surprised him, sitting there in the dark, the thing that told him more about who he had become than any lesson had. He thought about the Dursleys asleep upstairs. Vernon, who had raised a hand to him and had it turned. Petunia, who had painted his name on a card and stuck it to a cupboard. Dudley, who had shoved him into 100 flower beds. They had given him the cold years, all of them, and they slept now over his head with no idea that men had come in the night to take the nephew they had never wanted, and that whatever those men did to get to him, they would do it in this house, over the heads of the sleeping family, and the family could be hurt by it, cruel, useless, ordinary people who could not defend themselves against a single spell. They mustn't be hurt, Harry said quietly to the book, and meant it, and was a little startled to find he meant it. The Dursleys, whatever happens down here, they're asleep, they can't even see it coming, they mustn't be caught in it. The gold was still a moment. When the voice came, it had a warmth in it that had nothing to do with the coming fight. You are the last of the oldest house, it said, and you have just told me, on the night men have come to kill or cage you, that your first care is for the safety of the very people who gave you the cupboard we're sitting in. Do you know what that is, Harry? That is the whole of the inheritance, right there in one sentence, the thing all the rest of it was only ever for. Not the light, not the shield, that, the keeping of even the ones who did not keep you. I will hold the upper house myself, the threshold will thicken over their sleep, and no spell of the collectors will reach the stairs. You keep the cupboard, keep it long enough, and the deep places will do the rest. Now, it is nearly the hour, take your place, small air, take your place and be still, and let them come to you. And a little before midnight, the coin in Harry's hand went from warm to burning, and the book's gold flared awake without his touch, and along the threshold of number 4 the old guarding magic drew itself up to its full and ancient height, and Harry, sitting cross-legged and wide awake on the swept floor of the cupboard with the little sun banked to a coal, and the shield already humming ready between his open hands, felt the not-seeing tear. It did not fail gently. It was ripped all at once from over the house by a hand that had spent a whole spring learning exactly where to grip it, and the tearing of it was the loudest silent thing Harry had ever felt. A great soundless shriek of unraveling magic that no muggle in the sleeping street would hear, and every magical thing for a mile would feel in its teeth. And in the sudden nakedness where the concealment had been, the house at number 4 stood exposed under the summer stars, and out on the dark road. Where nothing had been a moment before, 3 figures in traveling cloaks stood at the end of the drive and looked at it, and the tallest and oldest of them, an old man with a collector's patient, indifferent eyes, lifted one hand toward the front door in the unhurried way of a man who has waited 30 years, and does not intend to wait 1 minute more. And for the first time since the night he was 4 years old, alone and cold and cornered with no one and nothing to stand between him and the dark, Harry Potter felt the old, small, animal fear rise up in his chest, the ancient recoil of the hunted child, and he sat with it a moment in the dark and let it come and let it pass and set it down gently, as the book had taught him to set down all true things. And then he did the thing that recoil had spent his whole life telling him he could never do. He rose to meet the ones who had come to take him. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The shield of the house, the Cursebreaker, reached the front step first and knelt and put her clever, ruined hands flat on the concrete and began to take the house apart. Harry, in the cupboard, felt her do it. He felt her attention run over the threshold the way a locksmith's fingers run over a lock, seeking the seam, the give, the one worn place, and he felt her find, at last, the anchor Dumbledore had laid there years ago, the blood ward, the mother's protection, and begin, with a skill that was genuinely great and entirely for hire, to unpick it. It came loose slowly, thread by thread. It had been meant to keep out one kind of enemy, the Dark One and his servants, and it had never been meant to keep out a paid professional with no dark mark on her arm and no murder in her contract. and so it fought her, but it fought her as the wrong tool fights, and she was patient, and she was good, and one by one the threads of the old blood magic parted under her hands. "Let it go," the book said, low and steady, when Harry moved to reach for it to lend it his strength. "It is not our ward, it is the Grey Wizard's, and it was always going to fail one day, and it failing now tonight is no loss, for it was never the thing that kept you. Save your strength. Let her spend hers opening a door that was already ours to hold from the inside. Be still, be ready. Let them think the last lock is falling." So Harry sat still in the dark and let the borrowed ward die, and when the last thread of it parted, the front door of number 4 Privet Drive swung open of its own accord into the sleeping hall, and 3 figures came in out of the summer night. They came in quietly. The duelist first, flat-eyed, wand low and ready, sweeping the dark hall with the economical attention of a man who had cleared a great many rooms and expected to clear a great many more. The Cursebreaker second, rising from the step, flexing her clever hands, her eyes already going to the cupboard under the stairs, for she could feel now what the finders had only glimpsed, the deep, slow, enormous magic banked behind that small door. And last, unhurried, an old man in a fine dark traveling cloak, with a face gone soft and heavy with age and eyes that had no cruelty in them and no mercy either, only the flat, patient one of a man for whom other people had long ago stopped being quite real. Ambrose Vane stepped over the threshold of the house he had spent a year learning, and looked at the cupboard under the stairs, and something moved in his old face that was almost appetite. "There," he said very softly. "Do you feel it? 30 years, it was here all the time, sleeping in a cupboard in a nothing house on a nothing street. Open it." The Cursebreaker went to the cupboard door. She did not reach it. She got within a stride of it, her hand already rising to the little latch, and the air in front of the door thickened and stopped her, gently at first and then not gently. A wall of nothing that would not let her hand through, and she pushed and it held, and she looked at it with the professional interest of someone meeting a lock she had not been warned about, and then she raised both hands and spoke a word Harry did not know, a hard cold word with edges, and struck the wall of nothing with the whole of her hired skill. It was the first blow of the fight, and Harry met it. He met it from inside the cupboard, from inside himself, the shield already up because it lived below thought now and did not wait for his cleverness. And the Cursebreaker's strike hit the shield and splashed against it and was turned, all of it, up and away, and the Cursebreaker rocked back a half step and looked at the cupboard door with the first real attention she had given it, because a house does not push back and a ward does not answer a blow with a blow. And whatever was behind that small door had just met her strongest opening and given it back to her. "It's warded from inside," she said, and there was a change in her flat voice. "Something's holding it, something awake." "Then wake it further," said Vane, unmoved, "and take it. I did not hire the two of you to be surprised by a locked cupboard." The duelist stepped up beside the Cursebreaker and raised his wand, and the fight began in earnest. They were good. Harry, holding the shield in the dark with the little sun banked and the ring warm on his thumb and the book open and blazing beside him, gave them that. They were very good, and there were two of them, and they were grown and trained and paid, and they came at the cupboard together, the Cursebreaker unpicking and the duelist striking, cold professional rhythm, and the small door under the stairs shuddered in its frame under blow after blow, and the shield rang and held. It held because Harry did not try to win. That was the whole of the book's teaching, come due on the shortest night. He did not throw fire back at them, though he could have, though every nerve he had wanted to. He did not open the door and meet them in the hall where their numbers and their reach would tell. He sat cross-legged on the swept floor of the cupboard that had been his cell and was now his keep, and he held the shield and he endured, and he let the blows come and turned them and let the next ones come, and he thought under the ringing with the cold clear part of his mind the book had trained only one thing over and over: last. They have to come to me. I only have to last. The duelist grew inventive, which is what the good ones do when the simple things fail. He stopped throwing single strikes and began to layer them, a battering blow to make the shield flex and a cutting one an instant behind it to slip through where it flexed. A rhythm meant to open a wall by tiring it, and it was clever, and it would have broken a lesser defense, and against Harry it did nothing but make him work, because a wall that is a will does not tire the way a wall of stone tires. It tires the way a person tires, and Harry, who had held this shield 7 nights running until it was as easy as breathing, had a great deal of breathing left in him. Fire came next, a rope of it poured against the small door in a steady roar, and the paint on the outside of the cupboard blistered and the little brass latch went cherry red, and the heat of it beat against Harry's face through the shield, and he held, and turned the fire up and away so that it rolled harmlessly along the ceiling of the hall and guttered out against the plaster, and left the cupboard door scorched black but whole, and Harry within it untouched. Once, only once, the shield gave. The Cursebreaker, quick to see that fire and force were wasted, slipped a thin cold probe of her own between two of the duelist's blows, aimed not at the center of the shield, but at its lower edge where it met the floor, the one joint in the whole curve, and for the space of a heartbeat Harry felt the wall thin there, felt the cold come questing through, and it was the nearest thing to a wound the night had yet dealt him. He did not scramble. Scrambling was a thing that had been trained out of him by a patient book across 5 long years. He simply did what the book had taught him on the night the light first grew, which was not to push harder but to steady, not to strain but to be sure. He set his attention on the thinning place, and he was certain of it, wholly and calmly certain as he was certain of the little sun, and the join sealed, and the curse-breaker's probe was cut off clean and sent back up her own arm so sharply that she cried out. The first sound of pain the night had wrung from any of them, and drew back nursing her clever ruined hand, and did not try the edge again. Good, the book breathed into him once in the thick of it. That is the whole of it, right there, not harder. Truer, hold, Harry, they are spending and you are keeping, and the keeper always outlasts the spender. Hold, and Harry held. And upstairs over the sleeping heads of the Dursleys, the threshold thickened, and upstairs over the sleeping heads of the Dursleys, the threshold thickened, exactly as the book had promised, so that the noise of the fight below did not wake them, and no stray edge of the curse-breaker's cold words climbed the stairs. And Vernon and Petunia and Dudley slept on through the breaking of their own front door and the battle in their own hall, guarded, without ever knowing it, by the nephew they had put under the stairs. The curse-breaker changed her method. She stopped striking the shield and began instead to work at it, to seek its seam as she had sought the seam of the ward, and this was cleverer and far more dangerous, and Harry felt her clever ruined hands go looking for the edge of him, the place where his certainty thinned, the worn spot every wall has. He had no worn spot. He was 9 years old, and he had held this shield mid-sentence about a bird, and he had held it while he mended a cup, and he had held it for 7 nights running until it was no more effort than his own heartbeat. And the curse-breaker's searching hands went over the whole curved surface of it and found it seamless, whole, a wall with no lock because it had no door, and she drew back from it at last with something on her face that had not been there when she came in. "There's no seam," she said. "I've opened the vaults of dead kings. There's no seam in this. It's not a ward, it's a will. There's someone in there whose will is the wall, and I can't unpick a will. Vain, nobody can. It's not a lock, it's a person." "Then we stop unpicking," said the duelist in his flat, cold voice, and he lowered his wand from the cupboard door and pointed it instead at the stairs up into the dark toward the bedrooms, toward the sleeping family, "and we give the person a reason to open the door himself." And Ambrose Vane, who was not cruel for pleasure but was worse, who was indifferent, inclined his heavy old head and said, "Yes, the Muggles. A child who wards a cupboard so well will not sit behind his wall while his family burns. Begin with the fat one. He'll come out. Something happened in the cupboard then." The duelist's wand was pointed up the stairs, and the cold word was already forming in his mouth, the word that would send fire or worse up into the sleeping dark where 3 ordinary people lay who could not defend themselves, and Harry, behind his shield, felt the whole shape of what was about to happen, and the last of the small animal recoil went out of him, and what rose in its place was older and quieter than any of that. It was the oldest thing in him. It was the thing that had woken when he was 4 years old and mended his own small hurt, the deep water, the whole weight of the line, Ignatus and every father after him, the friend of the boundary, the keeper of the threshold, and it rose in Harry not as a weapon but as a refusal, vast and quiet and absolute, and it said in a voice that was his and was also every Peverell who had ever stood between the dark and someone they were sworn to keep, "No, not in this house, not over their sleep. Not while I am the keeper here." The cupboard door opened. It opened from the inside by no hand, and the light came out. It was the great gold light, the one Harry had made only once, on the night of the telling, grown now past a lantern, past a harvest moon, filling the whole small hall of number 4 with a gold so deep and living that the wallpaper roses seemed to bloom in it, and the dust of the ordinary house turned in it like a galaxy of small suns, and in the heart of the light, in the open mouth of the cupboard under the stairs. A 9-year-old rose to his feet with an open book blazing in the crook of one arm and a black ring on his thumb, and a light in his eyes that was not the reflection of the gold but its source. And the 3 who had come to take him fell back before him, as men fall back from the opening of a furnace door. The duelist, who was brave in the flat way of men who have stopped valuing anything, recovered first, and turned his wand from the stairs to the child, and spoke the word he was paid to speak, the last word, the killing word, a bolt of light, the sick green of a drowned thing, and it crossed the golden hall straight and fast and true at the heart of the last of the house of Peverell. And the old magic met it and would not let it pass. Not the shield. The shield was for blows of the ordinary sort. This was the killing word, the curse that comes to conquer the boundary itself, to take a life before its hour, and it was met not by Harry's will alone, but by the whole ancient authority of the house whose bargain was with the keeper of the far shore, the house that had been named in the middle of the river of the dead, not conqueror, not victim, but friend, and by the oldest law there is, no servant of the killing word may take a Peverell before his hour, for the Peverells are under the keeper's own protection. Guests of the boundary, and the boundary does not permit its friends to be robbed. The green light struck the gold and did not splash and did not turn. It stopped. It hung in the air a foot from Harry's chest, trembling, straining, and then it went out, simply out, unmade. Its violence returned not upon the caster in blood, for the old magic did not deal in blood, but into nothing, dissolved, forbidden, refused by a power beside which the darkest curse men have ever made is a child throwing a stone at the sea. The duelist stared at the empty air where his killing word had died. He cast it again. It died again, a foot from the child, unmade. Asked a third time, his flat calm cracking now into something that was almost a plea, and the third bolt guttered out in his own wand before it left the tip, and the duelist looked at the wand in his hand as if it had betrayed him, and Harry looked at the duelist, and Harry spoke for the first time since they had entered his house, and his voice was quiet and it filled the whole gold hall. "You came to a house of the Master of Death," Harry said, "and you tried to use death in it. There's no older mistake." Then the full rising came, and it was terrible, and it was beautiful, and it spilled no blood. It rose out of Harry and out of the book and out of the black stone on his thumb and out of the very timbers of the house, all at once, a single tide of the oldest magic in the world lifting to its full and dreadful height, and the small, scorched hall of number 4 could no more contain it than a teacup can contain the sea. The walls seemed to grow thin and far away. The ceiling went up and up into a shell-colored dusk that had never been under any roof. The floor beneath Harry's bare feet was the swept boards of his cupboard, and was also, in the same instant, the cold wet shingle of a riverbank at the edge of the ordinary world, and the sound in the hall was the sound of a wide dark water moving, patient and enormous, a water that every soul that had ever lived had crossed or would cross, running now through a suburban house on the shortest night of the year, because a child of the house that kept its shore had called it up in defense of his own. The gold light gathered and deepened and became, for the space of that impossible minute, a doorway. The hall of number 4 was, and was also the near bank of a wide dark river under a shell-colored sky. The two places laid one upon the other, and in the light stood not only Harry but the shape of the whole line behind him, felt more than seen, a great grave company going back and back to the shell-colored evening at the beginning of the world, brother upon brother, father upon father, keeper upon keeper, every soul of the house of Peverell that had ever stood a watch. Arrayed now at the shoulders of the smallest and last of them, and at the head of it or behind it or through it the keeper itself, the warden of the last threshold, the friend of the house, turning its vast and patient attention for one moment upon 3 living souls who had come into a home under its protection to take by force what the boundary had given freely to another. It did not harm them. That was the marvel of it, the thing Harry would carry to the end of his days. It had every right and every power to take all 3 of them across the river then and there, and it did not, because it was not cruel and had never once been cruel, and because a house of the keeper's friends does not answer violence with slaughter. It only looked at them. And under that look the curse-breaker fell to her knees with her clever, ruined hands over her eyes, undone, unstrung, weeping without a sound for a life she had spent opening other people's doors. And the duelist, who had stopped valuing anything, stood rooted and shaking as the whole grey weight of every life he had ended came home to him at once, not as punishment but as truth, the truth he had spent a career refusing to feel. And Ambrose Vane, the collector, the patient, indifferent old man who had wanted for 30 years to hold the great lost things of the world in his own hand, looked into the doorway between the 2 countries and saw, at last made plain, the one thing his cellars full of relics had never been able to give him and never would, which was that he too would go down to that river in his hour, as every soul goes, with empty hands, owning nothing, taking nothing across. And that all his having had been a running from that single fact, and that the running was over and had always, always been going to be over, and that he had wasted the whole of a long life learning it 1 minute too late to spend the knowing well. The old magic looked at them and knew them to the root, each one, and it did not kill them. It cast them out. It put them from the house all 3, not flung, not broken in body, but set outside the threshold the way a tide sets driftwood above the reach of the sea, gently and finally and past all argument, and it took from them, as it set them down on the dark pavement of Privet Drive under the ordinary stars, the one thing that had brought them, the wanting. It unmade their purpose. Ambrose Vane, sitting on the curb outside number 4 in his fine dark cloak, could no more have told you why he had come to that street than he could have flown, for the hunger of 30 years had been lifted off him like a coat, and he sat in the summer dark an empty old man who had somewhere mislaid the whole shape of his life and did not reach after it because the reaching too had been taken, and there was only the quiet and the stars and the ordinary street. And the slow tide at the end of everything that he was, for the first time in his indifferent life, no longer running from. Into that quiet up Privet Drive came the goblins. They came the old way, on the swift roads that the failing of Dumbledore's ward had at last let run true to the door, and they came armed, a dozen of them, mailed in dark metal that drank the streetlight, with Nagnok at their head, and behind Nagnok, taller than Harry had known, goblins came. An old grey goblin in the black of the deep chamber whom Harry had never seen and knew at once by the weight of him, for Ragnok himself, the elder. Come up from under the city on the night, the oldest account in his bank came under attack. They came ready for a battle, and they found the battle over, and they found three of the most dangerous professionals in magical England sitting on a suburban curb like lost children, emptied of the very purpose that had made them dangerous, and they found in the open door of number 4, in a hall still dim with the fading of an impossible gold, a 9-year-old standing with a book in the crook of his arm, tired, upright, unharmed, and entirely unshaken. Ragnar stopped at the threshold. He did not cross it uninvited. Even now, even here, the old law held, and he waited. Harry looked at the old goblin and understood the courtesy, and gave the answer he had given once before to a visitor under his stairs. "You're welcome under this roof," he said. "Come in and be safe here and take of what I have, though I should warn you," and here something almost like humor moved in his tired face, "all I've got is a cup, and I'll need to fill it again." Ragnar crossed the threshold and looked at the child, and looked at the book blazing quiet in the crook of his arm, and looked at the 3 emptied hunters on the curb behind him, and the old goblin who had sat behind a desk of the deep rock for longer than any goblin living, and had inclined his head to a name perhaps 3 times in all those years, went down slowly, deliberately, onto one knee, on the hall carpet of number 4 Privet Drive before a 9-year-old in pajamas. And the 11 goblins behind him knelt with him. "Heir of the house of Peverell," said Ragnar, and his old voice filled the hall as the gold had filled it. "The bank kept its watch, and the bank came when the watch cried out, and the bank came too late, and finds, to its abiding astonishment, that it was not needed. You held. Alone at 9 years old, against a master curse-breaker and a paid killer in Ambrose Vane, you held your house, and kept your family safe over your head, and did not spill one drop of blood in the keeping, and turned the killing word itself 3 times in your own front hall. There is no wizard living who could have done what you did tonight, and there is no goblin either, and I have lived a long time and thought I had seen the shape of what the old blood could do, and I had not, and I count myself fortunate past the reach of my own language to have lived to be corrected. The debt of watchfulness is paid, but the bank finds it has contracted this night a new debt larger than the first, which is the debt of having knelt too late, and the bank pays its debts. From this hour you are not merely watched, you are ours to stand beside until the last of your line or the last of ours. Ask, and it is done." Harry looked at the kneeling goblins in the gold-dim hall, and he did not know at 9 how to receive so great a thing, so he received it the only way he knew, which was truly. "Then help me be ready," he said. "Not to fight. I don't want to fight. I never wanted to fight. Help me grow up safe enough and free enough and taught enough that one day I can walk out of this cupboard into the world that's mine and build a house that's warm and fill it with people and keep them, the way I kept the Dursleys tonight, and never have to turn the killing word away in a front hall again. That's what I want. Help me have a life. Everything else I can do myself or the book can teach me. But a life. Help me have a life." Ragnar rose and Nagnak beside him, and the old goblin looked at the child a long moment, and then he did a thing goblins are not known for doing, a thing his archivist would tell in the deep places for the rest of both their long lives. He smiled, a real one, hard and craggy and warm. "A life," said Ragnar. Of all the things the heir of the oldest house could have asked the bank for on the night he became a legend, he asked for a life. "Yes, the bank will help you have a life, Harry Potter. It will be our honor, which is the only coin we hold above gold." He turned then and gave his orders in the hard consonants of the goblin tongue, and the 11 rose from their knees and went out about their work with the terrible efficiency of their kind. 2 of them took the curse-breaker up between them, still weeping without sound for the doors she had spent her life opening, and she went without a struggle, past struggling now. 2 more took the duelist, who walked between them slack and staring, a killer emptied of the one thing that had let him kill, and who would spend the rest of his days, the goblins would see to it, doing no more harm to anyone. And 4 of them gathered up Ambrose Vane, and the old collector rose from the curb and looked back once at the small, ordinary house he could no longer remember wanting, and then let himself be led away toward a reckoning 30 years in the arriving, for the bank had a great deal to discuss with him concerning cheated ledgers, and the bank, as Nagnak had once told a 4-year-old, did not forget a cheat. Ragnar lingered a moment at the door. From within his black mail he drew a token and pressed it into Harry's hand, a coin like the first but heavier, older, its face worked with the eye-end lines of the bank, and on the reverse, freshly struck, the triangle and the circle and the line. The first coin was an inquiry, the old goblin said. "This one is a key, of a kind. It will bring one of us to you within the hour, at any hour, for the whole of your life, and after tonight there is not a goblin in the deep places who would not run to that call. Keep it with the other. Grow, heir, learn what your book has to teach. And when you are of an age to walk into the world and claim what is yours, come to us first, and we will open your vaults and stand at your shoulder while you take your name up into the daylight at last. Until then the deep places keep their watch, and it is a watch that does not sleep." He pressed one long hand to his chest. "Peace under your roof." Far up the road, at the edge of the drawn-back dark, 3 of Dumbledore's watchers stood frozen where the rising of the gold had rooted them. And among them, arrived too late as everyone had arrived too late, stood a very old wizard with a long silver beard and half-moon glasses, who had felt the ward fail from his high tower and come at once, and had reached the end of Privet Drive in time to see, through the open door of number 4, the whole of it. The gold, the doorway between the two countries, the killing word unmade in the air, the collector cast empty onto the curb, the goblins of Gringotts kneeling in a muggle hall to a 9-year-old boy in pajamas. Albus Dumbledore stood in the dark and watched a child he had left on a doorstep to be raised humble and hidden and dependent, and did the last of the reckoning he had been putting off for years. He did not go to the door. He understood, watching the goblins kneel, that the game he had been playing was over, had been over for some time, and that he had lost it, not to an enemy but to a truth, that the child was not, and had never been, and would never be, a piece he could move. He had meant to raise a weapon and a martyr, humble and unspoiled and ready to be spent. He had instead, without lifting a finger, without meaning to, allowed something old and patient and loving to raise a person whole and free, and guarded past the reach of any plan, and the person now stood in a golden hall asking the goblins of Gringotts, of all the things a legend could ask for, only for a life. Something in the old man's chest, long calcified around the shape of the plan, cracked quietly and let in a little air. He would have to think again entirely about everything. He would have to meet this child one day, not as a general meets a soldier, but as an old man meets a young one who has surpassed him, honestly, with his hands open and his plans laid down. It would be the hardest thing he had done in a long life of hard things, and he was not sure, standing in the dark of Privet Drive, that he was equal to it, and he was old enough and at last honest enough to know that being equal to it was the only thing left worth attempting. He turned and gathered his stunned watchers with a gesture, and went quietly back into the night to begin the long work of thinking again. He did not know it, but it was the most useful thing he had ever done for Harry Potter, which was to leave him, that night, alone with the ones who truly kept him. In the hall of number 4, the gold faded softly, down to the light of the little sun turning gentle above Harry's open hand, and the door of number 4 closed itself behind the last of the departing goblins, and mended itself, thread by thread, wood and lock and the borrowed ward and all, so that in the morning the Dursleys would come down to house exactly as they had left it, and never know. For a moment Harry stood alone in the mended hall in the last of the fading gold, and looked at the ordinary house come back around him, the coat pegs and the telephone table and the framed photographs of Dudley on the wall, none of them holding a single picture of the child who had just kept them all safe, and he found that this no longer put any ache in him, because he understood now wholly what he had only been told before. That the warmth he had wanted his whole small life was never going to come down those stairs from the sleeping family, and did not need to, because it lived in the cupboard, in the book, in the deep water of himself, in the goblins running home under the city with 3 broken hunters in their charge, in a warm house full of people that did not yet exist but surely would, because a thing that is truly yours finds its way home in the end. And he had that on the word of the one voice in the world that had never lied to him. The hall was quiet, the stairs ticked as the house cooled. Somewhere up the road a milk float whined faintly through the last of the dark, the first ordinary sound of an ordinary day that would begin in a few hours, exactly as 10,000 ordinary days had begun, with none of the sleepers above the stairs any the wiser that the world had turned in the night on the head of the child they kept under them. Harry went back into the cupboard under the stairs and sat down on the swept floor and set the book open on his knees, and for a while neither of them said anything at all, because nothing needed saying, and the little sun turned and the ring cooled on his thumb, and up through the floorboards came the ordinary snores of the ordinary family sleeping safe over the head of the child who had kept them. "We lasted," Harry said at last. "We lasted," the book agreed, and there was a fullness in it that had no bottom, and more than lasted. "You did tonight at 9 what your fathers spent long lives learning to do, and you did it without cruelty and without blood and with your first thought for the safety of the ones who wronged you, and I have kept the heirs of this house for 1,000 years, Harry, and held every one of them dear, and I tell you plainly as the last and truest word of this long night, there has never been one of you I have held closer, nor one I have loved more." And there it was, the word the book had never once said to him in all their long years together, spoken at last plainly by the oldest thing in the world to the youngest of its house, and Harry heard it and knew it for what it was and had always been, under the mending and the teaching and the guarding and the great gold light, and he put his hand flat on the open page over the warm, worn triangle, and he did not need to say it back. Because the book had been reading the hearts of Peverell since the forests came down to the sea, and it knew. They sat a while in the quiet after that, and Harry turned the 2 coins over in his palm, the old one that had found him in a gutter and the new one Ragnarok had pressed into his hand, and he thought about the years the goblin had spoken of, the vaults and the daylight and the walking out. "It's going to be different now," he said. "Isn't it? Not tonight, not tomorrow, but it started, the finding. I'm not just the thing under the stairs anymore. There'll be more of them one day, the Grey Wizard, the school he'll want me for, I expect, when I'm old enough, the world. It is going to be different," the book agreed, and did not pretend otherwise because it never had. You have been a secret kept in a cupboard, and secrets do not stay kept once they have kept a house against a master curse breaker and turned the killing word in a front hall. The world will come for you in its way, more gently than tonight, but just as surely. There will be letters and schools and old men with plans and the whole loud, crowded business of a boy taking up a great name in the daylight. But hear me and be easy. You go into all of it from strength now, not from need. You are not a hungry child they can buy with the first kindness, nor a cowed one they can bend with the first threat. You are the heir of the oldest house, awake and taught and guarded and free, and you will meet the gray wizard and the school and the world on your own 2 feet, with a book that does not leave and goblins that do not sleep and a name that is wholly your own. Let them come. We are ready for them. We have been getting ready for 5 years, you and I, in the dark, one night at a time. And we did not do it to make a weapon, whatever the gray wizard once intended. We did it to make you, and you are made. Harry looked at the little sun turning above his hand, and at the black stone on his thumb, and at the book open and warm on his knees, and at the whole small kingdom of the cupboard that had been a cell and a keep and was, tonight, simply home. You never left, Harry said. You said the first night that you'd never leave. You didn't. I never will, said the book. You know that now. You have always known it. Go to sleep, small heir. The dark came and you met it, and it will not come so boldly again, and there are years now for the other thing, the better thing, the growing and the learning and the walking out at last into the warm world that is waiting for you. Go to sleep, I have you. I have always had you. And in the morning when you wake, put your hand here and I will open, and we will begin the first day of the rest of it. Harry lay down on the cot that had been his whole small world, with the book warm against his chest and the ring on his thumb and the little sun turning low above him. And outside the cupboard the house slept, and outside the house the ordinary street slept, and far under the city the deep places hummed with the news that the oldest account had come awake and kept its own house against all comers, and on the kitchen windowsill in the gray light before the dawn, the small white flower he had named Lily turned its 5 pale petals toward the coming sun. And the last of the house of Peverell, warm and awake and wanted and kept, and no longer alone, closed his eyes and slept, and did not dream of the warm place he could not reach, because he was in it at last and had been all along and would be now for all the long good years that were coming. Chapter 7 End.